You want to do it there when we get to the beach and hear the water?
Oh, that's a good idea.
And we just hold
why don't we do both, just in case? Why don't we do both, just in case?
Are you recording or you want me to record?
I just hit record just now.
Oh.
Heading to the beach. Cultists
You're going to turn right at that light.
What is that?
Hey, what's this?
So don't forget, this is going to go at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, I know.
So nobody will have heard anything yet.
How are you, how are you feeling?
I'm nervous. All right, we're going again. This is just a relaxation track at the beach.
I'm even more nervous now. There's a bunch of people here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people here.
The beach is here.
I took some pictures for our Instagram.
My feet are going to be cold, but...
That's because the Pacific Ocean in which we are standing is very cold.
We're here to dance.
All right.
Should I not say dance?
I hope you dance.
Hey, this is Culture Just Weird, the podcast. I'm Kayla, and I'm a television writer.
Let's just start with that.
I just did it.
Okay. Welcome to Culture Just Weird. I'm Chris. I am a game designer / data scientist / journalist, I guess.
I think you're a podcaster, not a journalist.
Podcaster, not a journalist.
Don't cross that line. That's asking for trouble.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm Kayla. I'm a TV writer and definitely not a journalist. This is Culture Just Weird. We already said that. We're here. This is our second episode of season 5. We are still recovering from our outing from episode 1. There's been new development since then. If you want to know more about those developments, you're going to have to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/culturejustweird for our bonus episode on episode 1 about the Source family.
Yeah, we do a little bit of follow-up on that, and it's pretty interesting. Pretty cool.
I think so.
Hooray. I'm crushing it right now.
You're doing great. Look, I never write an intro and I never want to do banter because I'm always so excited about what we have to talk about and I haven't been able to talk to you about it in real life in the extent that I've wanted to talk to you about it. So I'm just like, let's just jump in. I'll take a breath.
You are, yeah.
We have a couple things to do before jumping in. First of all, I need to check in with you. How are you? Do you have any banter? Do you have any business?
How am I? I'm good. I'm a little sweaty because it finally started getting hot in Los Angeles again.
Hot.
Which is very annoying. I did want to mention that we got a bunch of good feedback since our last episode about our new format and that kind of thing. We also reached out specifically on Patreon to poll you guys and had several good comments about that. So I just wanted to say thank you for the feedback about the new format. And again, just to reiterate that, we're going from once every 2 weeks to once every 4 weeks with the intent that will give us more time to build a more in-depth episode, more time to actually do what we want to do this season, which is like go to places and do the things. And honestly, like some of the downside, which is like, oh man, we won't get to hear you guys as much. I think that's going to be pretty mitigated by the fact that I think the episodes will be longer.
Great.
Well, no, I think, that's what podcasts are well suited to that. And
true.
We sort of touched on this last episode where we were talking about like Dan Carlin style versus like an episode every other day style. I think that the similar thing is going to happen with us. And I think it already has in the first episode. The first episode we did this season was over 2 hours long. Most of our episodes last season were under 2 hours. So I think on the balance, it'll be almost equivalent like number of hours per week to listen to. It'll just be released at a different pace, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. The other thing we need to do in our episode today is we need to shout out our new Patreon subscribers.
Oh, yeah. We forgot to do that last time because we had patrons from over the season break that we didn't shout out. And I feel very badly about that.
Me too. So we're doing it here. So the patrons that we are shouting out a special thank you today are...
Well, so we do the new ones. Everybody that signed up new since the last time we did this. And the first one is Tribe Label Panda Austin, who I'm shouting that one out because that's actually my friend Austin. So thank you for signing up and giving us a boost on Patreon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you also to Benevolent Loki, Wild Hunt Alex, and Julie. Thank you to you guys.
Yeah, thank you for your support. We really, really appreciate it. And they've already been giving us good feedback on our polls and good comments in our various Patreon posts. So we really appreciate all that, and we really appreciate your support.
So Chris, are we ready to hop in?
Hop?
Like a sock hop?
Gonna sock hop right into this one. Hop on pop. Are we gonna hop on pop?
We could, but it's more of a sock hop. Well, are you ready?
I've never been to a sock hop, but yeah.
Well, I mean, just going off of that, when, Chris, if you would be so kind as to tell me and share with me, when was the last time you danced?
Like on purpose?
Yes. When did you accidentally dance?
I don't know. I'm not.
Like when a bug got in your shirt or something?
Yeah, or like ants in your pants make you
haven't had ants in your pants until
dance,
recent. I
think. I don't know. Oh, also, here's a thing. When you are in a saloon and somebody starts shooting their revolver at your feet.
That does happen often.
Yeah. So sometimes that happens and then you have to dance. I don't remember, honestly.
Oh, I think I do.
Really? Because I don't like dancing. Like, let's just get this out up front. Like, I know that makes me a shithead, but like, I don't know. Like, honestly, it's probably a shyness thing. I hate to admit it. Because I'm like a big tough dude, but I'm like terrified
that you might be self-conscious about something.
I know. I hate it. Yeah, but it is. Like I don't know. Yeah, self-conscious. That's a good word for it. For me. Anyway.
I think that the last time that you danced was when we did the episode about Zumba. And I made you do a Zumba class.
Yes. And I was actually not very good at it. Not to like...
Because you don't dance, so why would you be good at dance?
Right. I don't want to... Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be like, I'm so bad, like as like a way to, as a self-defense mechanism. But it was difficult to... I don't have that level of like brain to muscle coordination because like none of those connections are there. Right.
The skill has not been cultivated.
Yeah.
Well, personally, I know your relationship to dance, and I know I've talked about my relationship to dance because we did Zumba on the show, but, I'm somebody who loves dancing. I grew up in the world of dancing. I grew up in, like, traditional ballet, and, that can be both helpful and harmful to one's relationship to dance, but that's a different episode. But since then, I've kind of branched out to find a lot of, like, pleasure and healing and enjoyment in things like Zumba or pole dancing or even just dancing with my friends.
Your sister's really into dance too, right? Doesn't she study dance or something? No, what did she study?
Yeah.
She studied dance.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we interviewed her for the supplemental content for the Patreon.
Right. And she did like choreography. See, I like watching dance.
Sure.
That's fun.
Yeah. I do too. Yeah. You can appreciate the aesthetics of dance and the athleticism of dance and the creativity of dance without necessarily being somebody who's like, I love to dance myself. So as somebody who enjoys dance, I was really intrigued when I came across a Wikipedia article during, a nightly binge and came across something called Ecstatic Dance.
That sounds pretty fun.
And that little thing happened when something clicks in and like I immediately know it's going to be a topic for the show. And I was like, this is it.
You get the scent.
Yeah.
It's like a wolf on a hunt.
Yeah. I've talked to you a little bit about ecstatic dance as I've researched this episode, so try to put anything I've told you out of your mind.
Oh, okay. I do that usually.
I forgot everything anyway,
you just said, actually.
What do you think the phrase ecstatic dance means?
Well, I mean, like, ecstasy means to me, like, there's a pleasure element to that word, like a joyful element. There's definitely like not losing one's mind. How do you put it? Like, getting out of one's head. Right. Sort of like being, I don't know. I'm having a hard time articulating.
That's okay, because I'm going to tell you what it is.
Oh, good.
That's just an exercise.
Cut all of that.
But I smell what you're stepping in. Pretty much all of that. Like, I'll just read you from the Wikipedia. The first,
you smell what I'm dancing.
Smell what you're dancing into. The first line of the Wikipedia article is as follows, quote, "Ecstatic dance is a form of dance in which the dancers, sometimes without the need to follow specific steps, abandon themselves to the rhythm and move freely as the music takes them, leading to trance and a feeling of ecstasy."
Oh, trance. Cool. Yeah, that word abandon, that sounds right to me.
That's what you were trying to
That's what I was trying to communicate poorly.
It wasn't poorly. It just wasn't accurate.
It wasn't poor. It was just bad.
The term ecstatic dance describes an activity as opposed to a specific group or belief set. So, think of ecstatic dance as appearing everywhere from ancient Greek practices to cultural shamanic practices to New Age meditation practices to even something a little more modern that we will get to in a little bit.
Didn't Greek mystery cults have like a thing where they would like go out in the woods and like
dance until
they were like crazy or whatever?
Probably.
I'm literally, I'm not even in front of a computer right now, so I have no idea what I'm talking about.
You're just making shit up.
I'm just making shit. No, I think I heard that somewhere, but like, I don't know.
Who knows anymore?
Yeah.
I can't trust my own brain.
Disregard everything I say.
Ecstatic dance often leads to feelings of connectedness to others or to one's own emotions, is often considered a form of moving meditation, can result in time passing without like proper perception of said time passing.
Cool.
Can reduce things like stress and anxiety, especially social anxiety. And
Wait, it reduces social anxiety? Are you sure about that one?
Oh, baby. We will get to that.
Oh, okay.
And the ecstatic feelings can allow people to feel things like serenity, proximity to the divine, and even sometimes things, like ego death or becoming a part of a greater whole, becoming a part of a collective.
Damn, that sounds tripping balls.
Let's do what we do best and start at the beginning or the early days.
Okay, so like bacteria, the way the bacteria move.
Get together and vibrate really hard, and then they like lose their consciousness because they never had it to begin with. The word ecstasy itself is from the ancient Greek ekstasis.
Oh.
Ek meaning out and histemi meaning I stand. The word was often used in classical Greek literature to mean removing the mind and body, quote, from its normal place or function. So like really that thing you said, but like getting out of your head. Yes, that is like what that word means. It's like truly from its origins. In Greek mythology, there were these worshippers of Dionysus, these female worshippers of Dionysus called the Maenads, and they were described as ecstatic and frenzied dancers.
That's what I was thinking of.
You're thinking of Dionysus.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. An author named Alain Danilou described in his book Gods of Love and Ecstasy, The Traditions of Shiva and Dionysus, that the Maenads, as well as other female followers of Dionysus, which were called like Bacchanauts and some other words, these worshippers sought the wild delirium of possession by the god so they could get out of themselves, get out of their head, and they called this ecstasis. There were also male ecstatic dancers known as the Corybantes, who worshipped a goddess called, I hate it when people say like, I'm so sorry if I'm butchering this, but then I always have to say like, I'm so sorry that I'm butchering this. Kybele, a goddess called
It's impossible.
Kybele?
Kybele, okay.
Cybele? Sybil?
Okay.
I don't know.
No, I think the hard C is correct, but
I
like
think so too.
I think we just collectively decide as a society, like every 20 years, that whatever we've been doing the
Switch it
last 20
around.
years was incorrect.
So the Corybantes, they also included drumming in their practices, and there were other mythical male dancers. These included the Cretan Chorites, and these were like magical dancing youths who guarded infant Zeus, like guarded baby Zeus. He had specifically like these dancing guards.
Talk about a boss, baby.
These Greek myths actually gave rise to IRL ecstatic dance practices in Greece, in ancient Greece, particularly in honor of Dionysus. So it was like, oh, we have these myths about these the Maenads were probably nymphs of some kind, or like these spirits that worship Dionysus in this way. So we will also worship Dionysus.
So we're gonna like mimic that.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you sure that was chicken and not egg?
No.
Because it could, you know what I mean? Like
yeah, absolutely.
It could be the type of thing where it's like there's this sort of ancient practice that like gets codified into myth.
Shit gets all mixed up.
Right. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like it's chicken and egg. It's who knows?
In her 2003 thesis, The Danced Space, Ancient and Modern, The Role of Transformation in Classical Indian and Modern Dance, Meredith Russell describes the Oribasia, or mountain dancing, a ritual in which women engaged in, quote, unrestrained ecstatic dance where the human personality was temporarily replaced by another. Some theologians have argued that the Old Testament describes pagan practices of ecstatic dancing, specifically used for worship of Baal, like Baal. I think there's like some quotes from the Bible that are like, oh, will you something limping, and that limping may have described types of dancing. I'll get to that in a second. Let me go back. So we're talking about Old Testament describing pagan practices. Similar practices were also found in 3rd century Phoenicia, in 2nd century Syria. Let me just read you some abridged descriptions of these various dances from this theologian W.O.E. Esterly, and see if they sound like ecstatic dance to you. The prophets of Baal limped around the altar they had made, a dance in which the knees were bent one after another to give a kind of limping step, repeating for each leg. The dance increased to an orgiastic frenzy, the dancers crying aloud and cutting themselves with knives and lances to awaken the god's pity and answer the people's prayers.
Yes. Damn, that's metal as fuck.
Yeah. Dance until you wound.
Yeah.
How about, quote, priests began to howl all out of tune and hurl themselves hither and thither as though they were mad. They made 1,000 gestures with their feet and their heads. They would bend down their necks and spin around so that their hair flew out in a circle. They would bite their own flesh. Finally, everyone took his 2-edged weapon and wounded his arms in diverse places.
Holy crap.
That, I believe, is describing a ancient Syrian experience.
Okay. So may or may not have been Baal, but
different, yeah.
Levant area still.
Well, so what does all that sound like to you?
Definitely sounds like ecstatic dance.
Yeah.
To the point of self-injury, which sounds dangerous, but also I don't want to encourage that, but also I don't want to judge them. That's
sure.
The fact that they got to that point. I don't know. That's crazy.
Ecstatic dance is also found across the ancient and modern world in shamanistic practices, and shamanism is being used to refer to a system of religious practices found mainly in indigenous and tribal societies. And these beliefs involve the belief in a shaman, in shamans, who are people that have a special connection to the spirit world or the afterlife. They have healing powers. They can communicate with the dead or with spirits, and they can escort the dead or escort souls to the afterlife. So they have, a special connection to the spirit. And in these practices, ecstatic dance is often paired with rhythmic drumming to enter a state of altered consciousness as part of the spiritual practice. So a shaman may use ecstatic dance and drumming in order to, get in the headspace necessary to communicate with spirit.
Fascinating. This also reminds me of whirling dervishes, that dance practice where they spin around until they're ecstatic.
What's that from?
I think it's Turkish, but I don't.
I briefly talk about that. Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm talking about it right now. I found it referred to as Sufi whirling in Turkey.
Oh, okay.
So, as you're alluding to, many, many other cultures across the world incorporate ecstatic dance in spiritual or religious or cultural practices, and these often have very ancient origins.
Mm-hmm.
But these practices also continue to be established in modern day. And even to this day, it's still something that's very much around. So you can find these practices in cultures such as Rudra Shiva in India, Anastasia in Greece and Bulgaria, Sufi whirling in Turkey, Santeria in Cuba.
So the Sufi whirling that's the dervish thing?
I believe
that I was
so.
Thinking?
I think so.
Okay.
That's specific dance where it's involves a lot of spinning and
spin,
up, down.
Spin. And they have the long sort of skirt type things that flare out.
I think that's that.
Is that?
Correct us if we're wrong.
It's very cool.
Candomblé in Brazil incorporates this. Shaker and Pentecostal groups in America.
Oh, yeah.
There's Balinese ritual dances in Bali, Mariama worship in Guyana, and there's even practices in modern Western witchcraft.
Bunch of crazy people.
Religious historian Mircea Eliade states that shamans use dance, repetitive music, fasting, and hallucinogenic drugs to induce ecstasy. And ethnologist Maria Gabriela Wojcik identified 4 degrees of ecstasy that dancers might experience. So these are the warning, the whisper of inspiration, the prophecy, and finally the gift, the highest grade of inspiration.
She's missing the first step, which is sitting in the table in the corner being terrified to go dance.
Being a wallflower and then being swept away by the music. Actually, before that, we're missing your town outlaws dancing. Oh, yeah. And then you have to save it, and then you're able to get back to your ecstatic practices.
That's the flash dance step.
In the Western world,
Or is that dirty dancing? Or is it both?
What? That's Footloose, baby.
Oh, Footloose.
That was a
Jesus,
Footloose.
I can't even... Well, what's the difference between Footloose, dirty
Footloose
dancing, and flash dance?
They've banned dancing in
the
the town. Kevin Bacon's I love to dance. And then he comes to town and he moves to town and it's oh, this town banned dancing. And then he brings it back somehow.
Okay.
And Flash dance is
the one where she's on the stage and then the water
she's
with
a welder and
arched back.
And an exotic dancer. I don't remember the plot. And then Dirty Dancing that's with Patrick Swayze.
Patrick Swayze.
And What's Her Face, where it's like don't put baby in a corner and they dance together. It's not about a town banding dancing. It's just she learns to dance with Patrick Swayze.
Okay, I always get all three of those confused.
Different movies.
Forget one exists.
In the Western world, starting around the 1920s, musicologists basically believed that ecstatic dance and its associated music were like primitive and unrefined activities.
Yes,
and when I say music,
very primitive.
Yeah, it's like think about snooty white people who were like, it's not like my chamber music, whatever the fuck.
It's not like more refined music like the chicken dance.
Get out of here. In North America, however, the term ecstatic dance was revived by a dancer named Gabrielle Roth in the 1970s when she developed a practice called the 5 Rhythms, which is now widely popular in various New Age or meditation or Western spirituality or Western Tantra circles. Like, the first place I heard about the 5 Rhythms was I was watching, forget the name of the show, but go look for it. The Nicole Kidman, I forget the name of the show.
Look for this mystery show.
Oh, I remember it now. Was on the show 9 Perfect Strangers, I think it was called.
Perfect Strangers. I love that show.
9 Perfect Strangers? Something like that. It's the Nicole Kidman cult show on Hulu.
Okay.
Single season, and she runs basically like a culty retreat somewhere.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
She mentioned the 5 Rhythms, and I was like, what the hell is that? And yeah, it's I'll describe it to you now, so you don't have to go watch an entire television show that doesn't describe it. Or go watch it. I liked the show. The 5 Rhythms is basically a style of like structured ecstatic dance. There are 5 emotions associated with 5 different rhythms of dance. So the rhythm, like the flowing rhythm, is associated with expressing fear, staccato for expressing anger, chaos for sadness, lyrical for joy, and stillness for compassion. And those are all also associated with like various life stages. So like flowing for fear is associated with like birth, and stillness for compassion is associated with death, like those kinds of things.
I see.
5 Rhythms practices often take the form of like group classes, last for, there's one near us and they go for about 2 hours. They might involve other forms of meditation, but the purpose is to disconnect from the analytical mind and step into connection with the spiritual self through moving meditation.
I really got to disconnect my analytical mind.
Yeah, same. I know.
I'm sick of it.
Me too. Gabrielle Roth developed this practice at the Esalen Institute, which is an alternative humanist education center and intentional community on the California coast. I don't remember. Have we talked about the Esalen Institute?
I don't
in the
recall.
past? I've talked to you about it.
No way.
I have talked to you about it.
You have? Well, I said, I don't remember things that happen.
We might have talked about it in the past. We'll probably touch about it in the future. It is kind of like ground zero or patient zero for a lot of like Western and North American alternative spiritual or like pseudoscientific or pseudopsychological practices.
Starting to ring a bell again.
Good
now.
and bad. Like it's an interesting spot. Lots of things have come from it.
Okay.
So keep that in your back pocket for future topics. Numerous ecstatic dance formats have spun off from or been inspired by Roth's work since then. A couple named Susanna and Yakov Darling-Kahn founded the Moving Center School in England after learning from Roth in 1989, teaching their own version of the 5 Rhythms. And then they did more research or did more learning, and they founded their own version of ecstatic dance practices called Movement in Medicine. In the 1990s, Barefoot Boogies took place twice a week in San Francisco as
Good alliteration.
I know, I love it. These were drug and alcohol-free dance events that mirrored ecstatic dance practices. And since then, more than 80 cities in North America have come to offer ecstatic dance communities, including Austin and Houston, Texas, Toronto, Ontario, Oakland, California, Puna, Hawaii, and Los Angeles, California. These are generally paid entry events, kind of like a dance party. They are usually also drug and alcohol free, but also shoe and talking free. Instead, you're relying on like agreed upon hand signals so dancers can communicate consent or not to each other when dancing. So it's like if somebody wants to come up to you and dance, you can either like give consent or say like, no, I want to dance by myself right now, just using
it's like hand up
signals.
Means stop.
Yeah.
Or like
hand on the heart
over.
is like yes, or like prayer hands is like yes, but like a stop hand is like, no thanks, man.
What about a middle finger?
It's probably not one of the agreed upon hand signals.
Oh, okay.
Often these events will begin with a sharing circle or opening meditation and close with something similar. Also present at these events might be things like altars or journaling or celebrations of epiphany or just, you kind of get the picture.
I do, but that's not a picture I would have pictured. for like, that sounds very, I don't know, it's like a church session versus like getting together to dance.
Keep that in mind. These aren't the only...
Wait, sorry, the Kayla. We'll get to that is the catchphrase, please.
We'll get to that. These are not the only modern instances of ecstatic dance. In fact, in the last couple decades, experts have begun to compare the dance experiences in club culture and at raves to be a form of ecstatic dance. Anthropologist Michael J. Winkelman has talked about the structural parallels in shamanism and modern raves, such as the use of dance and music for bonding and sharing emotions, as well as the effects on one's consciousness and personal healing. And musicologist Rupert Till has written extensively on the placement of club culture and electronic dance music in the framework of ecstatic dance. To read a quote from him, quote, "Club culture has elements of religion, spirituality, and meaning. Its transgressional nature is partly a reaction to the history of repression of traditions of ecstatic dancing by Christianity, particularly by Puritan and Lutheran traditions," end quote. So basically Footloose.
Right, yeah, because it seems like there are Christian traditions that do incorporate it, like you said, Shakers.
And Pentecostals. In some forms, yes.
But it's like the
widely...
It's the Puritan. It's always the fucking Puritans.
I mean, I would say that it's not even just the Puritans at this point. Like, we can point to how many branches of Christianity are there? How many forms of Christianity are there? And we're saying like 1.5 incorporates
that's true.
this.
That's a good point. I've never seen dance Catholic Mass.
Yeah, it's not a part of the Catholic Mass.
They do other weird shit, but not dancing.
Dr. Till has often cited the research of others that describes electronic dance music culture as featuring, quote, trance rituals and ecstatic states.
Isn't trance like a type of music?
It is. It is a type of electronic dance music, yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
I thought this was fascinating to find something with such ancient roots featured in such a hallmark of contemporary culture.
Right. It even has the word electronic in its name.
And like club culture is like, that seems very of, our lives, like of our generation.
Yeah, it seems new.
I had to know more. So I reached out to Dr. Rupert Till, and he and I had a conversation about his work in this area.
Cool.
It was a mind-blowing conversation, and I am so excited to share it with you now.
Do I have to dance while we're listening to it?
If you want. Okay, so first of all, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners? You can say your name, profession, experience, anything you'd like to share about yourself.
Yeah, hi, my name's Rupert Till. I'm a professor of music at the University of Huddersfield. I'm also head of Department of Music and Design Arts. I'm a lecturer, researcher, musician, composer, and I also write and release music under the name Professor Chill and as Electric Sufi. So
I didn't know about I didn't know about Professor Chill. I was listening to some of your YouTube, some of your music on YouTube the other day, so I'll have to check out the other name that you said there. But everybody go listen to Professor Chill. It was great, like studying, reading, researching music. Have you been in academics longer than you've been a composer, or have you been a composer longer than you've been in academics?
I started off with music, I guess. I mean, I started music very early in life. I guess aged about 5, but studied at school and then at college and university. I started as a composer when I was, about 20. So yeah, early on. And I've been lecturing for about 26, 27 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is why we have you on as the authority.
Yeah, for a little while.
So this episode is exploring, I kind of came into it with learning about the idea of ecstatic dance, and it really brought me to, electronic dance and music culture. And I was hoping that you could kind of explain for our listeners what we mean when we're talking about electronic dance music culture, or EDMC.
We used to talk a lot about club cultures in the early days of this kind of research, and the sort of music that you heard in nightclubs, in clubs. But the trouble is, this music also appears on the radio, and it appears at music festivals and other events. So we started using quite a few years ago, probably 20 years ago, the term electronic dance music cultures or culture. So it's electronic music, but then some electronic music isn't aimed at these kind of dance events and dance audiences. So electronic dance music was the term we started to use, and culture, because we're talking not just about the music, not just about the recordings and musicians, but about the whole culture that surrounds it. whether that's clothes people wear, ideas people have, or anything else. This has started to change a bit because in America in particular, a genre of music emerged called EDM, or electronic dance music, which is a very specific type of electronic music. It's a very specific genre, which electronic dance music culture means all electronic music and dance. So we've actually started using, well, I've started using the phrase electronic music and dance cultures, just to make it clear that it includes house and maybe hip hop or techno or drum and bass or lots of different forms, which sometimes are different to EDM. But it means that any music that is electronic and is linked to dancing, and generally means those sort of genres like techno and trance and drum and bass and even disco that have been happening in clubs and outside clubs for well, since the 80s and before.
Can you, and I'm going off book now, but I'm just thinking about a paper I read of yours that we'll get to, but you specifically called out not using the term rave. Is that still the case? Is that a term that, you know, kind of points us as not really knowing what we're talking about, or is it more accepted?
Well, I think the term rave has gone almost full circle. It started off as a term that was really used by the music press, and not by people involved in the scene. And they talked about ravers, and people who were ravers didn't talk about being ravers. They talked about being clubbers mostly. But there were events that were called raves, and that went back to things that happened right back in the 60s and 70s, where there was a sort of moral panic about rock and roll being the end of the moral planet for our young people. And I guess the press used that term consciously to point out that a similar thing was happening in the 80s, when people went to these illegal parties where people would dance all night and might take drugs and do all sorts of nefarious things. But actually, rave has become a term that's used more and more, I think, as time's gone on, by people in this kind of scene. People talk about raving, to go out partying. And I think although it was a term that was looked down a bit on a bit, I think nowadays, actually, it's become much more accepted and acceptable, and people quite like the term raving, because you like, I'm going out to have a rave, you know, and it doesn't have to be just techno music. It could be anyone going out for a rave, really. So it's a term that I think has come full circle, and it certainly does say something about those big, euphoric, ecstatic events where lots of people are together in a crowded space dancing together. I think it has some value in describing that.
I mean, thank you for that answer. That helps me. I felt very old and out of touch when I read in your paper, like, oh, we don't say rave. And I was like, I've been saying rave my whole life. But now I feel like, okay, I can actually say it and not totally mark myself as not knowing what I'm talking about. Not that I'm involved in the culture, but it sounds like you have been involved or in the culture in some way. So how did you kind of first become interested in this or get involved in clubbing or raving or EDMC or all of the above?
Yeah, I started getting involved in electronic music a long time ago, partly because I was a piano player and playing in bands, so I became a synthesizer player in the 1980s when electronic music was synth pop. You know, it was the Human League or whoever. So I was interested in that kind of music before the sort of clubbing music explosion. And I used to go to nightclubs and dance to electronic music, and I used to play electronic music in bands before kind of computer music existed. And then I went off to university and studied music. And then I decided to do a master's in music technology because I became interested in the way that you could use computers to make music, inspired by my use of samplers. I owned a sampler, and mostly because it made realistic piano sounds, but samplers started to be used in this strange electronic clubbing music. So I went off to do a master's in that subject and met other people who were into kind of club music, electronic dance music, and made a conscious effort to go to clubs to find it because it was quite underground and not that easy to find. This was 1990. And so started going to clubs. I bought myself, I was interested in this music, so I bought myself a pair of 1210 Technics record players, vinyl decks, and started making early minimal techno music as early as 1990, and going to clubs and dancing to music and DJing. And I ran a sound and lighting company, so I was providing sound systems to nightclubs and staying all night listening to people playing music. So I kind of started to become involved in that scene myself. And then I kind of moved into I moved into academia after my master's. I worked in venues, I worked in the music industry for a while, and then started working in colleges and universities. And I was doing research into music, and I was listening to this club music and making it. So I started doing research in this area, and not many people were. There weren't many other people researching this kind of music at the time.
So you found a niche kind of thing.
Yeah, I found something that interested me. I was also interested in subjects about music and meaning and music and religion and spirituality more broadly.
Right.
And I was starting to do research into that, and I was looking at how pop stars are seen as religious figures or iconic figures. I was looking at Prince and people like that, and how they're seen as almost religious icons and stars, and why people did that and had treated them like gods. And then I found myself in nightclubs where I saw people behaving as if they were in religious meetings. You know, I'd been to Pentecostal Christian meetings with hands in the air and people whooping it up. Right. And then I'd seen people at massive concerts in stadiums having these ecstatic experiences. And then I went to nightclubs and I saw people having these other ecstatic experiences. And I started asking the question of, how do these all relate? What does this all mean?
You know, I'm just to go off of that, I'm going to jump ahead in our questions because I found your work through your paper, Possession, Trance Ritual in Electronic Dance Music Culture. So what you just said about drawing that connection between seeing how people are behaving at very religious, spiritual, Pentecostal events and how people are behaving at music, dance, etc. events, that seems like some of the thesis of that paper. Can you kind of explain how you went about doing your research for that and, what your conclusions were from that paper?
Yeah, I mean, the start of the research was what we call ethnography. I mean, ethnographers and ethnomusicologists are generally thought of as traveling off to Africa and studying the music of some tribe. But I was studying the music of my own tribe. I was doing ethnographic study of clubs, and not because I was an outside observer interested in what was happening there, because I was going to them. I was kind of part of that scene, and I wanted to see what was going on about and around me. So I started kind of making notes on some of the experiences I had. I started doing some interviews with some of the people that I met outside of clubbing. I'd kind of get to know important movers and shakers in the scene and go and talk to a promoter or a musician or a DJ or a clubber and interview them, ask them what their experiences were. And also, of course, reading other publications and talking to other academics who worked in this field.
Something specific that stood out to me in that paper was, you really clearly underlined how these experiences were similar. You talk about there is religious imagery in club events. There is trance. There are various types of ritual. There's dance. There's things that have very clear religious aesthetics or vibes. And then you would ask that specific question of some club goers. And even if they could say like, yes, this is, I do this, and this, that all sounds spiritual. I don't feel comfortable necessarily saying that this is a religious experience. Like, can you talk a little bit about that kind of conflict?
I think in terms of individual experience, a lot of the people who go to clubs or have these kind of ecstatic experiences in electronic music cultures are doing so almost as a conscious rejection of traditional forms of religion. So in some ways, they're kind of doing this as a replacement because it's like a religion, that it's similar to a religion but not a religion. And they're having experiences that they see as very much secular, so very much not in the religious world. And they're seeing religion as those things related to religious organizations. And actually, although it's a bad definition of religion, a common definition of religion is those things that are related to religious organizations like Christianity and Islam and Hinduism or whatever. So these people would say, well, this is nothing to do with church or mosque or whatever else. So, this is not religious for that reason. I kind of agree with you that these things, they are religious if you take Durkheim's definition of religion, which is those things that are not the everyday, that are either sacred at one end or profane at the other, that those things are religious. And that's a better definition of religion. But another way to look at it is there's been some work that's talked about explicit and implicit religion. So explicit religion is religion that knows it's religious and that it states it's religious. So churches, Buddhist temples, they're explicitly religious. But there are a lot of things that are implicitly religious. So they show all the markings, all the things that would make them seem to be religions. They have the imagery, they have intense belief, they have a lot of commitment, they have all this stuff. And we call that implicit religion. And in some cases, sports can be implicit religions, so can all sorts of different elements of society. And when they occur in kind of popular formats, so in kind of things like popular music or popular culture, they're often not recognized as being religious. But a better definition of religion is those things that are of utmost importance to us, those things that we can't live without and we have a kind of complete level of commitment to, which I think if you look at things using that definition, then these sort of electronic music cultures definitely are spiritual, at least, if not religious.
It's so interesting to hear you talk about explicit and implicit religion, because that's really what we're kind of confronting on this podcast. And granted, we've said, we're about cults, which is not an academic word, as we have learned. But that comes up again and again and again for us, that the hallmarks of what might make a cult, things like a charismatic leader or ritual or dogmatic belief, we have a whole list of what those things are. Those show up in so many different groups that have nothing to do explicitly with spirituality or with even, new age thought or anything like that. It's so interesting to see those parallels of like, yes, implicit religion can be a thing. And I feel like, what we're doing on our show is finding where those implicit cult behaviors are, or high control groups or new religious movements, whatever you want to call them. I want to ask about the, get more into the parallels between traditional spiritual practices, but I kind of want to go back to the history, because I know that you've done a lot of work with sound archaeology, and I've seen a lot of your research on like Paleolithic music and like going really far back. So you talked a little bit about the history of electronic music. It's been around, came up in the 80s, been around roots 60s and 70s. But how far back do the roots of this genre go? Like, I know soundscapes are a big thing. Like, how far back are we talking? Can we trace this kind of music?
Well, there's a number of answers to that. So we tend to think of this music beginning with an explosion of rave culture in 1988, 1989. And they talk about the Summer of Love, when a group of people came back from Ibiza and started organising these parties in London. And that was the big explosion of this scene with the smiley faces and was a big beginning. But that music was being played in kind of gay, Latino, New York, Chicago clubs since about 1986, 1985, and is really an extension of disco from about 1975. I regard disco as starting with The Hustle as the first disco record. But you've got you've got electronic music like I Feel Love by Donna Summer. You've got sweeping filters. You've got repetitive beats. You've got drum machines. You've got massive sound systems. You've got flashing lights. You've got underground club culture with drug taking, with people staying up all night dancing. All the things you associate with this music exist in disco. But so that's 1975, to go back a stage. You can take things even further back to the 1960s and the clubs culture of 1960, where you have underground oppositional culture, mainstreaming of drug taking, as kind of achieving altered states of consciousness, and also some quite experimental music that included some electronic sounds and keyboard sounds. So there are definite links to as well through to that sort of event, especially since music festivals were a big part of 1960s and 70s culture. And you think of the link between something like Woodstock or Monterey Festival or Glastonbury or Stonehenge festivals in the UK, and modern dance festivals, electronic music dance festivals, which you get certainly in Europe in places like Portugal in particular, or in Amsterdam. There's some very big festivals. And then there's another step back, I suppose, in time you can go to, and you can look right through the history of human cultures, and you will find that people dance together in order to have a communal experience, and to kind of merge themselves into one person, to lose a sense of self and become part of the group. And actually, that is a thing that goes way back. I mean, there's evidence at Stonehenge of echoes at 150 beats per minute, which is the similar tempo to modern techno or fast dance music. And you would naturally play music in that space at the echo speed, because otherwise it would be messy. If you play in time to the echoes, it sounds coherent, whereas if you play out of time, it gets messy. So there may be evidence that people did kind of group-like celebration rituals with similar tempos at Stonehenge 5,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago. And then, of course, you go back to the beginning of human music culture. The earliest evidence we have of a musical instrument is 43,000-year-old flute made out of a bone, found and probably played in a cave from a bird bone. And those are 43, maybe with 45,000 years ago. And in fact, it seems like playing music together and dancing together and having these kind of big ecstatic experiences together was one of the things that humans did that Neanderthals and other previous hominids didn't do, which allowed humans to live in bigger groups. So human beings lived in groups back in prehistory of typically at least 40 or 50 in small villages, or even bigger, up to 100, 200. Whereas, for example, Neanderthals lived in smaller groups of kind of 8 to 10, 12. So if you get a group of 8, 10, 12 people and they get in a fight with 40 people, the Neanderthals were individually stronger, but they were outcompeted for kind of, food, and outcompeted if sort of driven off. If one group want to do some hunting, they'll push people out of their hunting range. So in order to live in those big groups of 40 or 50 people, you need to find a way to bond that group together. And music and dancing is one of the kind of most powerful ways that humans bond together, those large groups. Because all the differences that you have when you're getting annoyed with someone, when they're getting in your way or pissing you off or, being annoying, when you then merge into one dancing body of people, it pulls you back together. It's very difficult to fight with someone you've just been singing with or dancing next to. So that seems to be something that helps. I mean, religion and meaning and these kind of things link very closely with music and dance. And music and dance seem to be some of the things that allow people to live comfortably and closely together, harmoniously together. In fact, as I've gone on in this kind of research, I've come to see music and religion the opposite way round to how I started. When I started, I kind of thought, well, people have beliefs and spirituality and religion, and music comes out of that. Increasingly, as I look at the past, I start to think, well, religions and spirituality are the sorts of things we develop in order to understand and make sense of the experiences we have when we're making music and dancing together. And that in many ways, I think music and dance comes first and meaning and belief comes as a result of it, as a result of the experiences we have, those transcendental altered state experiences we have when we dance or make music together.
Right. It's almost like trying to name or organize or make sense of something that inherently is is inherently spiritual, is inherently humanist in that way. Like if what you're saying, which is like, I'm sitting here, mind blown thinking about the ways in which music and dance culture brought humans cohesively together, allowed us to get as far as we've gotten. I don't even have a question to follow that up. Just that feels really profound, and that feels really true from what you're talking about. A question that I often ask when I'm doing interviews is, for example, last year we did an episode on fur fandom and fur culture, and we danced around the idea of, is there something inherent to the human condition that gives rise to fur fandom and other things like that? And I feel like you already answered my question on that. Like, is there something inherent to the human condition that gives rise to electronic music and dance culture? I feel like you said yes already.
Yeah, I mean, we're communal creatures. I mean, much like lions that are, or chimps that are animals that live in groups. And in order to do that, you need rituals that hold you together. And we always have done. So people have always danced. And whenever people have tried to shut down dancing or music, it's just re-emerged somewhere else. It's kind of squirted out the outside. And I think as culture became more worried perhaps about physicality, and became a bit more shut down through the 20th century, people started looking for other ways to find those experiences. As religions perhaps became more conservative and more hung up about physicality, people started looking for other ways to have ecstatic emotional experiences with groups of other people, because they weren't quite sure about, as atheism has appeared, they perhaps weren't quite so convinced about religion anymore, but they still needed that sense of connection with other people. So I think to dance together, to make music together, is to be human. There's some wonderful research that talks about it as a Jungian kind of dissolution of the self, as a form of group Jungian therapy, that we dissolve our ego and focus on the id, and it helps us be one together and come back to who we fundamentally are as human beings, and to focus on the things that we share, our common experience, rather than the things that make us different. And I think that's one of the things that's allowed humanity to thrive, because humanity does not thrive through war and conflict. It has thrived through trade and cooperation, and music and dancing helps people to cooperate.
Yeah, it's making me think, you don't really need to share a common language in order to be able to make music together or to dance together. And it makes me think of like, I'm showing how little I know about the subject, but it makes me think about clubs in Berlin. It's very popular idea to go to Berghain or go to clubs in Berlin, not necessarily because you speak German and can have very in-depth conversations with folks there, but because you can share in that dance culture and there is no language boundary.
Yeah, sure.
I want to go do that now. Oh, you have? Please tell me everything about it.
I've been to Berghain and I've danced there, and of course the Germans often speak English, but it didn't matter because, as you say, you could walk out, you could dance and you smile at people on the dance floor and you can get on with people, and that's kind of what you were doing. So, and I find the same I'm speaking at a festival in Portugal later in the summer and hopefully in Hungary as well. And at those events, you meet people from all over the place, and the dance floors, you don't know where people are from, but you feel connected to all of them at once, which is an intensely powerful experience. And after a weekend of doing that, it's really refreshing. It really reconnects you to humanity, to our global community. It's a really powerful thing.
Do you think it's also something that can help with things like social anxiety, something that might prevent somebody from wanting to go to a party and have conversations? I'm not the kind of person that feels comfortable going to a party and having conversations. I have social anxiety. But does it feel like something like this might, be easier for some people in order to be able to participate in group culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm now 55, but this year I got diagnosed with autism. So I have autistic spectrum diagnosis. And I've realized that one of the ways I've managed that, because I don't tend to feel I have great problems in groups, but that's because I talk about music to people, because I've become a specialist in music, and I can just say I'm a professor of pop music and people go, wow, and I'm immediately on a podcast with them,
Right.
or otherwise, I'm at a gig or a nightclub, and I don't have to talk to anyone. I can just dance and just join in, and I can still connect to people and feel connected. And you're right that it's an easier way in, and you might get chatting to people or you might not, and it doesn't really matter. And you don't feel awkward because you're just standing there, not like if you're at a party, you might just be standing there not talking to anyone. But if you're dancing dance floor and you're not talking to anyone, no problem. So yeah, that non-verbal communication is very universal. It's very egalitarian. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, or you're autistic, or you're the most outgoing, sociable person there is. Everyone can kind of find their place on the dance floor, and I think be equal, and that's very powerful. Again,
my co-host and I are planning on seeking out various events, and we live in LA, to supplement our experiences so that we can accurately talk about this when we do the rest of the show. And this is helping me gear up to go to these events. Do you have any advice for what types of events we should look out for to kind of maximize a positive experience?
Well, there's a term called PLUR, P-L-U-R, and that means peace, love, unity, and respect. And that's become the kind of code of conduct for people in clubs who have this more conscious clubbing approach. And that's another term that people use, conscious clubbing. And those are the sort of people who go to clubs, club type events, but are interested in events where it goes beyond just going out and either it being a kind of meat market type thing where you're just indulging in, I guess, mating rituals. So you're trying to attract the same or the opposite sex, and you're also going away from the things where people are just getting hammered for the sake of it. And
sure.
Where people are going clubbing in order to kind of raise their consciousness. And actually, I think in LA there's a group called Conscious Clubbing on Facebook that are based in LA. So the term conscious clubbing is one to look up if you want to find a club that has more of that attitude. That's a phrase you can use, or you can look for terms like peace, love, unity, and respect, or PLUR. Some people will sign their emails or their advertising with that, or put it at the bottom of flyers. So that's a good one to look at. There's an organization I think called Ecstatic Dance Los Angeles, for example, and they organize healthy dance parties. What's it they say online? Part rave, part intentional conscious dance experience. So those sort of things sometimes mix the kind of new age experience with an all-night techno party. And those sort of things are really often very friendly, are designed to have a focus on finding altered states of consciousness or exploring the inner self or the outer self, rather than, just getting hammered or just having a very straightforward experience.
Right. It seems like a lot of folks are really searching for that in a lot of ways of having that intentional experience. And I should have asked this before, but can we talk a little bit about the ways in which, this kind of postmodern ritualistic dance experiences, how they reflect more traditional spiritual practices? So again, in your work, you talk specifically about the idea of trance, and, the word trance comes up over and over again. Can we just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so there's a classic book by a guy called Gilbert Rouget, a French guy, who writes the book Music and Trance. And it's, the great work on the subject. And he spent all of his life exploring different trance experiences, mostly in Africa and the Far East, in Bali or in wherever, or voodoo cults or those sort of things. So he looked at different kinds of possession trances and ecstatic trances. And he separated the two. So he talked about possession trance experiences, which are noisy, loud, involve dance and movement, tend to involve loss of memory, loss of time, a sense of loss of self, where music inspires dancing, and dancing it inspires some sort of loss of track of yourself. And that's called possession trance, but some people are uncomfortable with that word. But it's one kind of trance that's kind of more upbeat and usually group based. So it's usually a number of people. And then there's ecstatic trance, which is separate. And ecstatic trance achieves ecstatic states through often stillness and silence, or music that's quite still, like might be chant or not have much rhythm to it, chill out music, ambient music. Actually, the sort of thing that you now discover in electronic dance music culture, in ambient or chill out music, or in the chill out rooms they sometimes have in clubs or raves or whatever. So you have that kind of two sides. In the classic nightclub of the rave scene of the 1990s, you would have the main dance room, the trance floor or whatever, where people would be dancing to loud music in a big group. And then there'd be the chill out room where people might be sitting just quietly recovering or getting some headspace or having a chat. And I guess those are the different approaches to finding trance. The common theme that I've found in trance is that you tend to lose track of time. So in the most extreme possession trance, where you totally lose yourself, whether that's someone at a nightclub who's perhaps taken various substances and is gone a long way from their self, or in a sort of classic African possession trance where a spirit has possessed their body and they're no longer conscious of what they're saying. You know, suddenly they wonder what the time is and they realize that 4 hours have gone past. So that's one end of that experience. I guess the lighter end of the experience is you're listening to a piece of music and you lose track of time and you think 2 minutes have gone past and actually about 10 have gone past, or even you just think a few seconds have gone past while you've been staring out the window drifting off and actually more time has gone past. That's a kind of trance state. So I think that loss of time is a key theme, a key way that you can tell that you've been involved in trance. Traditionally, those ecstatic states, I mean, they're everywhere. Still small voice of calm they talk about in Christianity, where people, you know, meditation and chant exist in Christian culture. Buddhism is full of those sort of ecstatic experiences. Meditation, mindfulness is all the way through Buddhism and lots of contemporary paganism's alternative spiritualities. Then you've got kind of Hindu culture with yoga and that kind of meditation. Islam has a lot of this sort of ecstatic meditation type experiences. Then you have the possession trance type thing, or the more upbeat trance rituals at the dance floor of, well, the slain in spirit Pentecostal experiences of Christian churches. That's a possession trance ritual, according to many cultural studies analysts. So those are the two sort of ways of approaching it. One through stillness, losing track of time because you're not listening to the tick of the clock anymore, and you're not conscious of time passing because everything is still and you're still and your eyes are closed maybe and you're focusing inwards. And the other end of the scale is where you're overloaded with a loud volume so that you've got so much input into your ears that it blasts out your thinking, where that what you see might be very intense and again blasts out your thoughts, where there's so much overload of input that you lose track of yourself, where there's a rhythm that's so intense that you lose track of time because you're just focused on the rhythm of the music and of the dancing, and you force your body almost by sort of going bang, 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 by thumping your body and dancing, you force it to synchronize to a time that's outside of your normal sense of time. So I think those are the two ways that you lose track of your connection to the day-to-day world, lose track of time and connect to something other, something altered, and find an altered state of consciousness or some sort form of ecstatic trance experience.
The way you're describing it is making it sound very attractive, like the idea of being able to lose yourself in this greater thing, you know, something that I think might keep some folks away from you know, going to a rave or going to a club even, is the idea of, you know, am I going to be self-conscious? Am I going to, like, I don't know how to dance. I don't know how to move my body. And it feels like those things might almost be forced to fall away because you're just going to be consumed by this external stimulus.
Yeah, and people don't care in clubs. People don't. I mean, we all sometimes think in a club, oh no, do I look stupid? But right. The reality, no, nobody cares what you look like. They're busy dancing, especially at these clubs. People are busy dancing. They're not really looking. I mean, okay, some clubs, yeah, you get the club kids who all care about fashion and what you look like and all of that, and it does happen. But that tends to happen in the more expensive, upbeat, you know, uptown clubs where people are dressed up and trying to look fine. In these sort of clubs, I mean, a lot of the dress is either quite extreme and almost like fancy dress, or it's very casual dress code, certainly. And the way people dance, often you're so close together, you can't see anyone dancing other than the 2 or 3 people around you anyway, because you're dancing quite close to other people. I think it can be intimidating, though. I think the whole idea of losing yourself in that way, of letting go, is quite scary. If you're used to quite a traditional life where you live according to the ticking of the clock, where you follow a routine that is safe and secure, then it can be difficult to let go, to let the experience take control. And so I think that's why some religious approaches have been afraid of these kind of ecstatic experiences, because it's about loss of control, it's about loss of self, and it's about trust in the people around you and everybody else. I think my experience of these things is that everyone in these experiences, in these events, tends to be very encouraging, very, embracing of all sorts of people from different backgrounds, different ages, different walks of life, different cultures, and genuinely interested and welcoming. And everyone's encouraging everyone else to have a good time, and the whole vibe. You get carried away sometimes in a swept up sense of emotion. I think the one qualification you need to take part in these sort of things is the willingness to have a go, to let yourself go, to participate, the willingness to join in with other people and see what happens, which can be quite a brave thing to do, I think. But it's a different sort of bravery to self-consciousness, perhaps.
Yeah, it's just making me think of, I'm from America. Puritanical culture rears its ugly head from, hundreds of years ago. It is still around, and it does feel completely antithetical to what we've talked about today, of the idea of losing control, of being swept up in something, of being part of a greater collective. It feels very antithetical to those kind of more insidious pieces of puritanical culture that are very much about control of the body, control of the self, individualization, all of those things that I think a lot of us, probably the world over, but I can only speak to here, are desperate to get away from. And it feels like this is of course, this is a spiritual outlet. It is in direct opposition to that kind of like spiritual tyranny. And so I wanted to ask you, you have talked about your experiences with all of this. Can you talk about, have you had any particular experiences that you would describe as spiritual? Like, has that been an experience of yours?
Well, yes, in many ways. In one of the things that first drew me to the whole clubbing experience was actually I was interested in religion and spirituality. I went to churches, and I came across a church where they used club culture so they replaced hymns and psalms in a Christian church with electronic club music.
Oh, cool.
And dancing, and removed all the chairs and had massive PA systems and video projectors and all of that. And that became a thing, and it's now called. It's a thing. It's certainly in the UK, in the Christian world, it's called New Expressions, I think. So I've experienced in Christian churches those experiences of dancing to club music, and in a conscious way of attempting to reach God, and a lot of that music has gospel lyrics, so it's very easy to find that sort of source. I've also then, as later on in life, as I became more of a humanist, I guess, or became more broad in my spirituality over time, after the kind of excitement of youth. Anyway, I got involved in the conscious clubbing music and performed and DJ'd in things called the Synergy Collective in London, which was a club with, I guess, 1,000 people at it, that was run by a load of people interested in spirituality and interested in running a nightclub that was overtly spiritual, or at least the people putting it on were trying to provide a space where people could connect with themselves in a deeper way. And so that was enormously powerful, I found. I mean, I've played at the Boom Festival, and the Boom Festival in Portugal is, it's called Boom because the idea is over time, more and more people will connect with a new understanding of spirituality and of themselves and each other, and the need to follow joining together instead of fighting each other. And eventually there'd be enough people to form a group and it would go boom. So the whole idea of the Boom Festival, they talk about liminality and spirituality. So I performed there on a chill out stage with 2,000 people scattered around this stage at the top of an island, some of them floating in the lake, playing music as the sun came up at kind of 4 a.m. And just the most wonderful experience of connection to these other people who are all sort of chilling out in this. I mean, it's a beautiful countryside space in the Portuguese mountains. That was quite an amazing and spiritual experience. And many times in clubs, just having been dancing to music for, usually takes me a while to get going, maybe after an hour or so, and you're just so connected to the music and you're not thinking about anything. You're just completely in your body and moving and connected to everyone else in the room via the music, because you're all moving in time like one kind of creature on the dance floor. You're just losing a sense of myself and just being lost in the music and the dancing, and just feeling an enormous sense of ecstatic experience inside myself, and also in connection to the other people around me who I could kind of tell are having the same sort of experience. So yes, I've found that. I started off with music, singing in choirs when I was 6 or 7 years old, in church choirs, with the very traditional cassock and surplice and little white ruff and all of that, and spent many years, in religious traditions and doing yoga and being interested in meditation. So those I recognize the same experiences that I've had in those explicitly religious contexts that I've had in implicitly religious contexts, whether that was watching Sting sing Free, Set Them Free in Wembley Stadium, all the hairs on my body going up and feeling this immense euphoria there, or a big club event or a festival event, or dancing on the dance floor. I recognize that it's the same feeling, and essentially for me it's the same experience. Whether it's the same thing, well, for some people there may be very different things, but to me they're part of the same thing that's going on, at least in my experience.
I was very intimidated to dive into, real life events. But after this conversation, I cannot wait. This sounds incredible. It sounds ideal. It sounds incredible. It sounds like what I think a lot of people are looking for in terms of connecting to their spirituality and just, connecting back into their body. I think so many of us don't really live in our bodies in that way, or don't get to spend a lot of time being totally in the body. A lot of us are in our heads. I'm very much in my head. So very much looking forward to that. Appreciate all the insight. I do have kind of our last question that we're getting to. So we're a podcast about cults. And when we talk about cults, we have a set of criteria. So we're talking about things like, is there a presence of a charismatic leader? Is there presence of harm? Is there dogmatic beliefs? Is there a chain of victims? Is it unsafe to exit? Is it niche within its society? It's a colloquial term. It does not have much academic merit, but I do want to ask, in your academic opinion, are there any aspects of anything we've talked about today? So electronic dance music culture, rave culture, electronic music in general, ecstatic dance, anything that might verge on culty to you or not?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book called Pop Cult, Religion and Popular Music, where I talk about different cults of popular music. And one of the chapters is called Trance Cult, Cults of Electronic Music. And so cult is a really interesting word. And cult is a 4-letter word used by religious people about religions they don't like. So, they use a word that sounds a bit like a swear word, and it doesn't have many letters different from swear words. And a cult is an organization, right, where it can be damaging or difficult to leave with, strong leaders. People give a lot of their time and their money to these organizations, like Christianity, Islam, any organized religion is absolutely a cult. But there are old cults like Christianity, and then there are new cults like whatever. Is electronic dance music cult? Well, New religious movements is kind of the term that is often used academically instead of cult. Is electronic dance music culture a cult? I would say it's like a religion, but it's not a religion. Just like Madonna, like a virgin, not a virgin.
Right.
It's like a religion, not a religion. Many of the same things go on in clubs that are like a cult and like a religion, but not a religion. I think there are risks to kind of line them up with cults in the way that cults can be seen as bad. Electronic music cultures can take over people's lives, can distract them from, I guess, take them away from their families and their friends because they're doing things that they're not sure that mainstream society would approve of. It can lead people into drug culture, which can be destructive and can lead to addiction and can lead to damage and can lead to all sorts of things. And I think that happens to some people. And then there are other people, I think, that take less addictive drugs or, I don't know. So that's a risk, obviously. And because of that, leaving can be difficult. If people do get a bit addicted to going, clubbing every weekend or spending every summer going off to festivals or these events, and it can affect people's lives. I think a lot of drug and alcohol counsellors nowadays talk about harm and problems, and that you have a problem if something is affecting your life in a negative way. So if people are going clubbing and it means that they end up separated from their families and their friends, taking too many drugs, not getting enough sleep, missing work, losing their job, then it's going to do them harm. On the other hand, if they go clubbing at the weekend, if they connect with themselves and with other people, if they lose their ego a bit and become a bit more focused on their id and on themselves, if they rediscover themselves, if they connect to communities and re-energize themselves, ready to go back and face the day-to-day world, then it can be a very powerful force for good. So there are cult-like elements of electronic dance music. Who's the charismatic leader? Well, it's often the DJ at the front who absolutely controls people. They play a record, it goes bang, and everyone moves their hand or their leg or their arm. People are absolutely behaving almost like robots that are being told to move in certain ways, although it's all voluntary, of course. So, yeah, there are people, if we're just talking about liminal culture, tricksters who kind of encourage people to do things they might not ordinarily do. I suppose the point is sometimes it's good to be encouraged to do things you wouldn't normally do, to take you out of your comfort zone. If you spend your whole life in that liminal zone, not engaging with the real world, then I think that's not necessarily a healthy thing. So I think it's a really interesting subject. There are certainly things that might verge on culty, but it depends, I suppose, on your perspective and on how people do that. My experience has not been that people have suffered or not been able to leave if they want to. My experience is that quite often people get into relationships or move job or they have children in particular and can no longer go out clubbing all night, which is kind of, I suppose, what happened to me. I don't go clubbing very often anymore because, if you've got to get up for an 11-year-old at 6 a.m, you don't want to be out till 5 a.m. And you get older, your life changes and you move on. So I think it is possible to leave. It's very rare that people are forced to stay in these things. Some people spend a lot of time and money on these things and going out to dance culture. And I think people have to be wary because there is a history in this particular music scene of people taking various illegal substances in order to allow them to dance all night and in order to enhance that experience. And I think that's something people need to be maybe not afraid of, but aware of and make intelligent decisions about. I think people are intelligent myself. I don't think people are idiots who will just suddenly start becoming heroin adults or PCP maniacs or because somebody near them was doing that and they smelt it and thought, I've got to become a dope fiend or overnight.
Right.
That's not my experience, but some of these scenes can be complicated, I guess. But it's just about engaging the normal levels of common sense. In my experience.
Right. I mean, it sounds like there's a spectrum to some degree, but overall, we're finding we're talking about more positives than we are talking about negatives. And I think it's really interesting that you started that answer by, talking about the word cult and its context in regards to other religions, like something that Chris, my co-host, and I often say, not on the show because it sounds pretentious, but we do say like, oh yeah, well, religions kind of are just the cults that made it. Like you mentioned, Christianity very much started as that like classic, cult, literally a cult. So I appreciate you kind of bringing that perspective to it as well, of what that word means in context. And I need to read the pop cult book almost immediately.
Yeah, I mean, Christianity was a cult within Judaism originally. And when I was writing that book, I needed a definition of the word religion. And I found that most of the religious studies work is done by scholars who are based in places like theological colleges. In other words, they're members of religious movements. And they define religion as those things related to their religions, their religious movements. So those are what I call old religious movements. And they are afraid of the new religious movements because the new religious movements challenge them and challenge their place in hegemonic culture as the dominant forces.
Right.
So obviously, for those religions to have other people saying, no, we're the truth. They say, no, you're not. We're the truth. We've always been the truth. And those movements have been immensely powerful. And yes, I would agree that one of the main differences is the age of those organizations. Individual parts of any religious movement can be a cult if it becomes damaging to people's lives rather than contributing to lives. And I think pretty much every religion and every spiritual experience, whether it be clubbing or a traditional religion, can make huge contributions to people's lives or be hugely detrimental, depending on the people who organize these things, how much they care about the people participating, and how much it's about them rather than about the people who are taking part. You have to remember that the early days of club culture in the 90s, there were about 500,000 people in the UK alone going out to nightclubs, dancing all night, probably taking drugs, and having a whale of a time, frankly, every Saturday night. And that's more than in the Methodist Church at the time, which is one of the biggest Christian groups in the UK, So it's been quite a major movement and is now global. It's in almost every country. It's spread across the world. It's a significant part of culture, especially with young people. I mean, more so your generation than mine. And it's useful to understand and know more about. My experience and my study of it has shown it to be something with enormous capability to contribute to people's lives and their experiences. And the people I've seen at these events have generally been enriched by them. And I think that tie-in that we started talking about, for tens of thousands of years, humans have danced together in order to get to know each other better and share experience and connect with themselves and their attitudes of cosmology or spirituality. And I think that continues to happen in the old religious movements, but also in places like nightclubs and music festivals.
I could not be more excited to go and dance this weekend and get involved. You've really given me, and I think our listeners, a lot to think about, a lot to chew on, and a lot to be excited about. So, Dr. Till, that brings us to the end of our questions. Is there anything that we missed that you'd like to share or speak on, or did we hit it all? I
was just looking at a picture on my computer as we're talking of a club, and one of the things that we haven't really talked about is the way people kind of behave at these things and what it looks like, and the similarities, the obvious similarities with various sort of spiritual practices. I mean, the thing of people putting their hands in the air, when you see 2,000 people putting their hands in the air when the music kind of lifts up, I mean, there's just an uplifting feeling in that sort of thing. When you get these gospel piano sounds or these big anthemic gospel choir type voices, there's all those cultural tie-ins to various human cultures of belief and meaning. You see lights scanning across, like, I don't even know where. I guess it's similar to the sort of images you always see when you see a picture of heaven, when you see the clouds parting and rays of light coming down from the sky. Clubs use that sort of narrative. They put smoke into the air so that you see these laser beams or these big light beams coming down and wheeling across you. And it's a very euphoric experience. And it overtly draws upon those images we have of belief and spirituality and gods and deities. And that's not accidental. I think these practices deliberately draw upon many of the images and ideas that we're used to associated with kind of ecstasy, meaning, spirituality, and uplifting experiences. So I think that's an exciting thing to look forward to when you go out clubbing.
Yeah. I'm like, truly, you're painting a really exciting picture. And I have not been excited to go dance in a giant group of people in a long time. So I'm very much looking forward to it, and being able to have this kind of shift the context from maybe some preconceived notions of, oh, it's going to be about like going and drinking, and there's going to be a lot of judgment, and I'm going to be worried about what I look like. You've really reframed those expectations. So I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people go with lots of different backgrounds. The people who go and they'll just drink water because they're just coming out for a couple of hours and they're going back to relieve the babysitter to look after their kids or whatever. There's all sorts of people at these events. I think an important thing is to listen to some of the music, find out what music they play there and listen to some of it and make sure it's somewhere where you will want to dance. Okay. It has to be music that you like. It might be not the normal music you listen to, but if you hate drum and bass, don't go to a drum and bass club. If you like house music, go to a house. If you like more techno-y stuff, find stuff that you think, well, I like some tracks like that. So it helps if there's something, if it's the type of music you just are going to like dancing to. I think that's probably more important than anything.
All right. I'm going to go listen to some music then and see what's out there. Dr. Till, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking with me. And I think our listeners are really going to learn a lot from this interview and also just have a really good time.
Cool. Please do send me a link when it's coming up, when it's going to be on or whatever. That'd be great. And please do mention Professor Chill and Electric Sufi. Then people can check out some of my music as well. I look forward to hearing the program.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Dr. Rupert Till.
Dr. Chill.
Professor Chill.
Oh, sorry. Wait, is it Professor Chill or Dr. Chill? Because
Dr. Till, Dr. Rupert Till.
Yeah.
And he makes music under the name Professor Chill, as well as Electric Sufi.
Because Dr. Chill sounds like a Batman villain.
That does sound like a Batman villain. He instead sounds like a cool club DJ, Professor Chill.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So I have thoughts.
Let's hear them.
So the first thing I have to ask is, you mentioned in a couple places there that you and I are going somewhere tomorrow?
You and I are going to be attending Ecstatic Dance LA, which is a dance party literally on Venice Beach.
Kick ass.
Yeah. They describe it as Ecstatic Dance LA weaves together world-class DJs, immersive sound journeys, and free-form movement. It's a substance-free, all-ages community celebration where you can simply be yourself and experience rejuvenation and inspiration through connection, dance, and music.
Okay, so that sounds... I know I said up at the top of the episode that I don't like dancing.
Right.
And it makes me feel self-conscious. But A, that sounds awesome. B, after listening to Professor Chill talk about ecstatic dance and things like Plur and all that stuff, I feel much more excited to go.
It feels like there's a little bit of a different expectation here than maybe the preconceived ideas you and I have had about club culture. I think in general, you and I kind of came up at a time when mainstream club culture was more thought of as like something you would see on the Jersey Shore, as more like the quote unquote mating rituals that Dr. Till talked about of like you go to the club and you're going to get drunk and you're going to maybe try and come home with a sexual partner, and there's a lot of pressure to look a certain way and to
make
behave a certain way.
And to interact. And then there's like the, bouncers only, like, any girls can go in, but like no dudes.
Right. You might not get let in.
Yeah. It's like somebody saying, do you want to go to the club is just like extraordinarily intimidating.
Right. Right.
But this didn't sound that way. This sounded like it's much more about this like experience that is halfway between dance and like meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems like that's something that was the piece that was maybe missing for you and I when thinking about things like rave or what Dr. Till defined as electronic dance music culture, and certainly what is being presented in conscious clubbing, as he referred to it, as happening here with Ecstatic Dance LA and other things like that.
Yeah. Okay. So, and that also answers another question, which is, Kayla, how is this going to go with the theme of the season? Because we have to be on theme or else it's just not going to work. Ugh. But obviously us going to the dance. Yeah, I figure Dance LA.
We can chat a little bit about our reactions to this conversation with Dr. Till, but then you and I are gonna head out to the actual physical experience, and then we can come back and talk about what that was like.
So this is a Culture Just Weird first, where we're like we've had like bifurcated episodes where we talk about a thing. There's like an interview or an experience, and then we talk about that. We react. But this is the first time we've reacted to an interview and then reacted to something else.
Right. Right.
It's a reactionception. It's another turducken, really.
It's just cult duckins are
the turducken season.
The move this time around.
So you mentioned conscious clubbing. He had like a bevy of like interesting ways of putting things, like interesting nomenclature.
Arsenal of vocab words.
Yeah, there you go. A dance lexicon, if you will. Mm-hmm. So another big one for me was explicit versus implicit religion.
I was screaming inside when we were talking about this because it's something that is so clear once you have those terms defined.
Yeah.
And it's like it's been there all along.
Yeah, it's totally like, I was like, should we just name the podcast Explicit versus Implicit Religion? Now, granted, that's not as pithy and catchy as maybe as Culture Just Weird, not to pat myself in the back, but that's totally what the show's about.
Yeah.
Right? That's totally what the show's about. Like some groups are explicitly like, yes, this is a spiritual thing that is about connecting with a supernatural deity.
Right.
And then other things just have those trappings. And I think there's almost another way to like kind of break that down that I was thinking during the interview too, of like sometimes the implicit religion is actually about the spirituality. You just don't state it. Right? That's the explicit versus implicit. And then it feels like sometimes, at least for groups on the show, I don't know if this applies to dance, but for groups we've covered on the show, sometimes it's more like lab coding. It's more like it has the hallmarks and the characteristics, but isn't actually necessarily about spirituality. So I'm thinking of something like MLMs, basically, mm-hmm. right? So now, granted, MLMs do leverage spirituality and spiritual sort of terms sometimes. But for the most part, they're using these tools of ritual and, anti-faction and whatever else. They're using these tools, but it's not for the purpose of spiritual transcendence and like ego breakdown and community building. Whereas something like ecstatic dance or maybe a lot of new religious movements or whatever are for that. Does that make sense? Kind of feels like there's like even like still a separate breakdown there a little bit.
Yeah. I think I get it.
Like one is it's like there's explicit religion, which is like we are a religion and we use the tools of religion. And then there's implicit, which is like we're totally not a religion, but like actually we are and we use the tools of religion. And then there's just like we're using tools of religion. It's not actually for the spiritual part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the MLM slots really nicely into that of. But it also like I think that MLM does a similar thing as to what Dr. Till and I were talking about of like it fulfills a need that people have that may not be met by certain aspects of modern society. Like
absolutely,
it still fulfills those holes left behind by like the removal of this kind of spirituality. And I don't want to say like, oh, Christianity is like devoid of community building and but in some ways it is. And
for some people.
And for some people it is. For some people it has been a way to, there is obviously community building when it comes to attending church and the fellowship that comes with that, specifically Christian church. And also, especially just speaking to various phenomena in American culture, there are ways in which it can be isolating or individuating, or in mainstream Christian culture, being in touch with our bodies in certain ways is not okay, or is not cultivated.
Don't get footloosed.
I'm getting footloosed. I don't know. That was very rambly.
No. I mean, okay. So just to like tie
different
that
things
in a bow,
fill different holes that are left behind.
Your mileage may vary.
Yeah,
certainly. But like, if you're somebody who is like not feeling alienated by the things that church does to alienate certain people, then yeah, maybe it is actually pretty useful in terms of like community building. But if you are alienated by one of the many things that it does to alienate certain people, then, oh shit, where do I get my community building and spiritual, like, in touchness? Yeah, the answer is you kind of have to go somewhere else. And it certainly seems like a lot of these groups fill that need. And I will also point out while we're on it, the fulfilling a need is like another central theme that we've seen in the show. Yeah. And it's, if the question is, well, if there's no such thing as brainwashing, then how do these people blah, blah, blah? The answer is because they feel a need. We saw that with QAnon, right? It's not that they're brainwashed. It's that there is a particular need that is not being met elsewhere. And these people have found it via these message boards and this community and yada, yada, yada. It fills a need. And sometimes that need is hope. Sometimes that need is community. Right. Sometimes it's something else, but that's another common theme.
And that's something that is making me even more excited to go and attend this dance event tomorrow, because it feels very serendipitous that this episode is falling where it is, because it's falling at a time when I'll just speak to myself. You can jump in if you want. Falling at a time where I am actively trying to cultivate more of a relationship with being in my body and being out of my analytical brain and disconnecting from that to being in that space where it's like I'm present in the body. And I am also trying to reinsert myself into society as much as safely to do so in this new post-COVID vaccine world. Still not a post-COVID world, but a post-COVID vaccine world where, a lot of people that I talk to, this is a challenge of trying to get back to the level of like
social interaction.
It is a challenge. It is difficult. It is a muscle that you have that has atrophied a bit and needs to be worked out. And I
like to have big muscles.
I do like to have big muscles. So there's a lot of needs that this is. I'm excited to see if this meets those needs.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree. Same. I'm trying to not be so goddamn analytical all the time. I think that like another thing that so why are we doing this podcast? I don't know. I feel like we question the podcast every episode for some reason.
We should be doing interpretive dance about these topics.
Yeah, there you go.
Talking about
that'll translate real well to an audio format. Okay, so in that vein though, I do find it hard to do things like just meditating, and I think it's because there's like it's like still just in my head.
Yep.
Like how am I going to think my way into not thinking? And I know that's possible. Like people do get a lot of benefit out of meditation. I just think for me, maybe the dance part of this will actually be easier, because it's not like, all right, I'm going to fucking relax now. I'm going to think really hard about relaxing and then I'm going to relax. Instead, it's going to be just like, just move your body and like let whatever happens. It's
the same reason why like walking meditation is a thing. Or it's why moving meditation is a thing, because some people need that in order to be able to enter that meditative state. And I think that especially folks that are maybe dealing with ADHD, like specifically reasons why sitting in stillness is just not accessible to the brain. A person with ADHD will sit in stillness and find it more difficult to access said stillness than if they were to do an activity that can get them out of that pattern.
Switching gears here, I also really thought the historical stuff was super interesting. Obviously, you know that I'm a fan of history. Everybody probably knows that on this podcast. But I thought that him talking about like how ancient it all was, and like I wasn't aware of one of the differences between the two hominid groups. With Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, I wasn't aware that part of the difference was the size of groups. Like, I knew that, like, part of the reason, like, why we outcompeted other things generally was because of our ability to, like, work cooperatively, like in hunting and stuff.
Right.
But I didn't know that that was, like, also an advantage against other hominids. And the fact that, yeah, dance might contribute to that makes sense. It's interesting to think about.
It's literally the only thing I want to talk about right now.
I know.
I went into work right after that conversation, and like the first thing I said was like, "Did you know that this is an idea that people have about why Homo sapiens were able to outcompete?"
Yeah, I mean, like, it makes sense. I don't know, especially the ego boundary breakdown part of it, right? Like, if part of the reason that you're going to do this is like, whoa, cool, I'm gonna like break down my ego boundaries and like experience this trippy trance thing, then yeah, that would make you feel closer to other people, because the ego boundary is the thing that makes you feel separate. And if you remove it, you feel more together.
Dr. Till described it as feeling, I forget exactly what he said, but just like feeling like you're all part of one bigger creature or organism.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. That'll definitely make it easier to build pyramids or whatever it is that we use to, that's how we beat the Neanderthals, right? We built pyramids. It was like a laser or something. I think
so. I think there was aliens.
Alien laser. Okay. So that was super interesting. The idea of it being sort of like a universal language, because like you guys were talking about, like, yeah, you just go to Germany and like you don't have to speak German. You just have to speak the language of dance.
There you go.
That was interesting too. I thought him talking about how this type of event sort of helps people that are maybe neurodivergent, like himself, recently diagnosed with autism. Going to a place that has like these explicit rules kind of helps.
Right.
Makes a lot of sense, right? Like there's these rules, how you can interact here, and this is how it's done. That makes it easier to do, less anxiety to do it.
Well, and even since I had that conversation with Dr. Till, I've had some other conversations, off podcast that also made sense in this arena. Like I talked to somebody who is also autistic and really considers himself a part of the rave scene or rave culture. And there are parts of going to these events that feel, some things don't mesh well with autism, particularly if you have like sensory issues, but some things really do mesh well with autism, like even those things that cause sensory issues. I talked to somebody who said, I like to feel the music in my bones. So it has a physical sensation that meshed well with her autism. And then having things like he talked about, having chill out rooms or places where you can go to escape maybe the overwhelming sensory input. And yeah, just not having to talk to people.
Well, I mean, the other thing that really resonated that's sort of like along those lines is him talking about how the DJ is kind of like the charismatic leader.
Mm-hmm.
The DJ is the one that is issuing instructions, and part of the value of it, of the event, is that you get to surrender your autonomy. You get to surrender your
right, like,
executive function. And that's like part of what can get you into this trance, is that you don't have to think about what to do next, because the DJ is telling you what to do next. And that really did like, we've talked about this before too, with some of these cults where we're like, man, these guys like join these cults and they're just so brainless, and I kind of get it.
Somebody else telling you exactly what you get up and you do this, and then you don't have to worry about where your money is coming from. You don't have to worry about where your food's coming from. It's just someone's taking care of it.
There's like this total double-edged sword thing there where it's like, man, they're just doing everything the cult leader says. What the hell? But then like there's also this like, oh, man, that sounds nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a context,
cults.
No, we're not. But I am drawing the parallel, and I'm saying in a context where there are rules in place for, safety,
right?
Where it won't become like a high control, like destructive situation. Or, the DJ is just going to like help you achieve this trance-like state, and then you're all gonna like shake hands and go home. That sounds pretty nice.
Yeah.
I can't believe you didn't mention Lo-Fi Girl.
I did not mention Lo-Fi
How
Girl.
How could you not
or
mention
her new
Lo-Fi
companion,
Girl?
Lo-Fi Boy.
There's been like a whole thing.
Yeah. Everybody go on TikTok and look up Lo-Fi Girl lore, and I don't think we should get into it on the show. Maybe
everybody's probably already knows what we're talking about.
Maybe we can do bonus content on it.
Maybe that'll be our bonus
Go
episode.
check out Lo-Fi Girl.
We listened to a lot of that stupid shit on YouTube
Call it
because it's
stupid.
nice.
It's
Like,
not
I shouldn't call it stupid. I should call it basic, but like I
Don't
mean
call
that in
it
a good
basic
way.
either.
It's totally basic, Kayla. You watch that stuff and you're like, that's like the
disagree that
pumpkin
it's
spice
basic.
latte of YouTube channels.
I don't know.
All right. There was one more thing I wanted to bring up, which because you also had me watch a few of his YouTube videos, and one of them they went into that old cave and like tried to sort of like
He does a lot of research, like I mentioned the sound archaeology. He does a lot of research in Paleolithic music and Paleolithic music making, which fuck.
just
so
it's
cool.
cool as fuck. And so he and some others went into this cave to like basically try to make Paleolithic music, and he was like one of the parts, it's like he was playing the stalactites as like a xylophone.
Oh my god.
Which, like, I didn't even know. I was like, rocks don't sound like that. And then I looked it up, and actually, stalactites, like, most stalactites are hollow.
Had no clue.
So they totally could sound like that.
Yeah.
So he was, like, playing these stalactites. It was baller.
Making beautiful music.
Anyway, good interview, man.
It was honestly, I was on a high the rest of the day. It was so interesting, so fascinating, and really made me have such a deeper appreciation for this event that you and I are about to go do, where I was feeling very nervous and anxious, and that's still there, of course, but I'm so much more looking forward to hopefully the benefits that we'll come away with at the end of it.
All right. I can't wait either. I'd say let's go, but it's tomorrow, so
You ready to go dance in 24 hours?
For you guys, it'll be one, like, fade out and then fade in, but for me, it's going to be, like 15 hours from now? I'm tired. I'm tired.
What'd you think?
Tired.
When's the last time you danced for 2 hours straight?
Never. Okay, so regrettably, I had a good time. I must report.
That's an understatement. That was a tremendous time.
I don't even really know. Actually, I know where to begin. The best part, for sure, was the fact that there were dolphins dancing with us. So
Set the scene.
So here we are on the beach in Venice. Bunch of human beings on the beach with headphones on. And the headphones are playing techno, dance, EDM, the type of music we've been talking about on this episode. We're all looking out to the ocean, kind of moving our bodies around. And there's some dolphins out there. And now, that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for there to be dolphins. But these dolphins, they came in real close. So they came in, like, literally, I think, close enough.
You could have swam out
where
to
you could have,
them.
like, walked out to them. And then they started jumping out of the water.
Like full-on SeaWorld style jumps.
Not like, oh yeah, you can see their dorsal fins. No. Full, like if there was a hoop out there for them to jump through, they could have gone through the hoop. They were completely out of the water. It was incredible.
I think that they could not hear the music, but I think that they could see us all moving our wiggle worm bodies all across the sand, and they wanted to join in. Yeah. And there were dolphins
I think there was also a bait ball out there.
There was there was also pelicans that were flying through the sky and soaring through the air and diving into the water. Seagulls. It was very like one with nature type of experience. It was quite the scene, man.
Yeah. Now, I know dolphins have been canceled, and rightly so, but it's still, when you see them in the wild, in nature, it's still quite cool.
Oh, it's extremely cool.
So that was probably the best part. And then the next best part was, so we set the scene, bunch of us, probably around 200, you'd say?
I'd say I'm estimating about 200 folks.
Yeah, so it was about 200 people.
All different walks of life, it seemed like, all different shapes and sizes, creeds and colors, just representative from many, many different demographics.
There was a lot of diversity there. There was like crazy white people, crazy black people, crazy Asian people, crazy people of every color and probably creed. There were masculine-looking dudes, feminine-looking dudes, masculine-looking women, feminine-looking women. It was just very diverse.
Yeah, it was great.
So you have all these people dancing with these headphones on, that's the type of thing this was. It was, silent disco style, which is all of the music is being pumped through to your headphones. And if you take the headphones off, everything's just quiet, or, the sound of the ocean. But you put the headphones back on and there's the music. So the second best part was how there were people walking by.
Like regular people going on their like beach walks.
Yeah, because this was just out on the beach. Like it wasn't like cordoned off or anything.
Public beach.
Public beach. And so, people just are walking on the beach, and then sometimes people would walk by that don't have the headphones on, so they're not part of the thing. And it was just like...
You could see the, awkwardness and the, what the hell are these people doing?
Because, imagine that you are that person. You don't have this music playing in your head. You don't have any context. You haven't done all of the research and bought the tickets and gone, all that stuff. And then you just walk by a bunch of people just, kind of flipping out on the beach. That would be quite strange. So, okay, so that was the second best part.
And I will say the style of dancing that was predominant isn't... Again, it's not the what you'd expect to see if you're watching an episode of The Jersey Shore. That's my point of reference for this, of folks that are specifically going to the club to try and look sexy or to try and link up for the purposes of hooking up. This was very expressive, flowy, hippy dippy, what you would picture. You might see it Woodstock or really swirling arms and that kind of thing. So again, it doesn't look like people just grinding their sweaty bodies together. It's people that look like they're on drugs, even though it was a very explicitly a sober experience. And they reiterated that a number of times to keep the space safe for everybody and to really be a present experience. No drugs, no alcohol were a part of this.
Yeah, I think, the
even though it looked like it was.
Yeah, the intent is for the dance to be the thing that gets you out of your head, not some other mediative type thing like drugs or alcohol. Not that there's anything wrong with that. This was just not
different experience.
It was a different experience. I think I did get out of my head a little.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you as somebody who is not into dancing and finds themselves not really interested in dancing and even maybe finds themselves a little afraid of dancing. Yeah. What was your enjoyment level of the actual physical movement part of the experience?
Still terrified.
Sure.
That didn't maybe it diminished. It didn't go away. I definitely super enjoyed myself. And I think that would be true even if there weren't dolphins. Not everything can have dolphins jumping out of the sea. I think I would have had a fun time dancing and just sort of being in that environment, that experience and listening to that music. I think it would have been fun regardless. So that was enjoyable. But I definitely I would say I was maybe between at any given time between 20 and 40% out of my head.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah.
Peaking at 40% out of my head maybe, but most of the time I was still kind of in there. And granted 20's low, but it's a lot higher than my normal 0.
Right.
So just being a little bit out of my head at some points was nice.
Right.
But yeah, I still definitely I feel like it's also kind of a muscle.
Yeah.
I'm not used to using that sort of physicality to get out of my head aside from actually, I guess weightlifting maybe does that to some degree.
That's still very regimented and exactly what to do. And there's not a creative or flowing kind of component
it's also very punctuated, right?
Yeah.
When I do a set of 5 squats, during each squat I'm out of my head, but each squat takes 3 seconds. So it's just it's boom, boom, boom. So yeah, I did get a little bit out of my head, but I also was still I was still pretty self-conscious most of the time. Sure.
I think that where we kind of positioned ourselves was helpful. You and I, when it first started, we walked right up to the shore's edge. So there's nobody in front of us that can turn and look at us and make us feel embarrassed. And then eventually the crowd did move around us more. So then it was okay, we're in the middle. And also there's the safety of looking out at the water.
Right.
It was kind of the perfect position to be in, I think, for people who might be a little more self-conscious.
Yeah.
But I think that once people kind of came around us, or once the entire dance floor moved more towards the actual shoreline, towards the water, that was when it was even easier for me, and I probably for you, to get out of my head, because that's where you saw everybody else doing that. That's where we saw people doing improvisational dance with each other, people who'd never met before that were all of a sudden in a dance flow together, or you look over and you see somebody who is doing dance moves that you'd go I would feel goofy doing that.
Yeah.
They don't look goofy doing that, but I would feel goofy doing that. So if if they feel comfortable doing that, then, that opens up what I can do.
I'm not judging that person. So I guess nobody would be judging me either.
Right.
So, but even still, it's it's a little bit hard. I actually want to comment too on the hey, this isn't about hooking up thing. Because I think Professor Chill mentioned that, and they also sort of reiterated that once here as well. I was thinking about it That's actually, I think, a real helpful piece of not being as self-conscious.
Yeah.
Because, like, trying to find a mate is, like, tremendously stressful. And, like, you're all about, like, how do I look? How do I look? How do I look? How do I look? Do I look okay? Do I look? Am I making a fool of myself? Am I making a fool of oh, my God. It's, like, tremendously in your head, self-conscious, stressful. And then when you throw dance on top of that.
Right.
It's like throwing lighter fluid, like, into a furnace. So removing that lighter, or actually, I don't know which, I'm losing my metaphor here. Something about fire, but removing a piece of that, removing the, like, oh yeah, this isn't about me getting laid. This is just here. And this is not about that for anybody here. We're all just, like, kind of being in the place and doing the dance.
I think that allows for, like, an even more, like, for the experience to be more about, like, connecting with everybody as humans. And not that connecting sexually isn't, obviously that's also a very human animal thing to do, but it just kind of, like, evens the playing field a little bit, or, like, gets you down to, like, a core soul level of, like, I am just with other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it kind of breaks down any sort of othering.
Right.
It's just, we are all people here to dance, and I can dance with men, I can dance with women, I can dance with non-binary people,
right,
I
that's
can
the
dance
other
with
thing.
agender
Like,
people,
I didn't feel at all, like, awkward about potentially dancing with a dude here, whereas, like, at the club,
right,
I think that would maybe feel weird, or I would be like, oh, I don't want to, like, lead this person on, or
right,
this is awkward, or whatever. But yeah, there's just so much less pressure, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you go to, like, that's one of the words I think of when I think of, like, actually going to, like, the club. It's like, oh my God, there's so much pressure. There's so much pressure going to the club.
There's also a lot of pressure to have a good time.
Yeah.
In that kind of environment. It's kind of like New Year's Eve, where it's like there's so much pressure to have a good time that it becomes impossible to have a good time. Where it's just like, how can I have a good time when I'm having to put on uncomfortable clothes and have to go wait in a line, and I have to go be self-conscious and I have to leave with somebody or else I'm a failure. And it's like, this was
comfy
everyone's
clothes.
wearing comfy clothes, your shoes are off. It was very much like, don't have your phone out, like, try to disconnect from your phone. It was also explicitly like, no talking on the dance floor. Like, if you want to chat, step off the dance floor, but while you're on the dance floor, try to maintain nonverbal communication and, like, really be in your body and see how that feels. So it was like,
dance floor, by the way, is metaphor here, was actually it was just sand.
It was just the beach.
There was no, like, floor.
No,
it was just the
it
sand.
was the space in front of the DJ. I feel like even with the rules, they were taking away some of the things that add pressure in other dancing scenarios.
Totally.
And this, even if you were self-conscious, at least you could go, like, at least I'm not going to end up in the back of someone's fucking Instagram photo. Like, you're not having to worry about somebody's going to be videoing this, or somebody's going to be taking pictures of this, or I have to pose for pictures, or, like, it was cameras off the dance floor. Let's leave this a sacred space. So yeah, I have no desire to go dance at a club where I'm expected to go home with somebody. That sounds like too much pressure, but this was, like, ideal embodiment practice in that way.
I also had a hard time getting out of my head early on, because there was a little girl that was dancing next to us with, like, a 4-foot long, like, pointed stick.
Yeah.
And, you know, what was she? Probably like 8. So, like, she didn't know any better kind of thing. But it was just like, she's like swinging this stick around. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get impaled here. What the fuck? Eventually, like, after a few minutes, she sort of moseyed over somewhere else. But I was like, oh my God, please, caretaker, please come remove this spear from this person's hand. Like,
I mean, that was also something cool, though. Yes, don't give your children spears, but, like, there were kids at this event. And
yeah,
there were
cool
dogs,
there were kids.
and there were grandmas, and there were, like, it was literally the full gamut of representation.
Kayla,
was
it's always fun to have kids until they run you through.
How does the experience? Did the experience live up to? I think we've already answered this, but did the experience live up to the picture that Dr. Till painted?
Yeah, I
in
think
our
so.
Conversation.
I think so.
Do you feel like
I felt very different? Again, like, I felt very differently about this than I would I don't want to say normal, but I feel differently about this than I would a stereotypical in my head club experience.
Do you feel like you would have had the same level of enjoyment if you hadn't gotten the kind of, like, context and opinion and bias from Dr. Till beforehand? Professor Chill, Dr. Till.
Dr. Chill Till. No, of course not. Like, I think having
you needed
context,
that context?
I think that I would have gotten enjoyment.
Okay.
I would have gotten the same type of enjoyment, but for sure having the context enhanced it.
So I do feel affected by this event. Like, I feel like I'm still coming back into myself in some ways. So if we're a little all over the place, forgive me. We just had we had an embodiment experience. It started with collecting your headphones and stretching and whatever. And again, we're literally, people are just setting up blankets on the beach and sitting on the beach and watching the waves come in. And then everybody, all 200 people, get in a giant circle and are led through some like stretching and breathwork exercises before we begin the dance. And that really kind of helped set the expectation and like bring you into this thing, even if you're feeling uncomfortable or feeling awkward, as you and I both were.
Yeah, gets everybody on the same page.
And then the dance commenced, where the DJ, wonderful DJ, we'll be sure to link to Ecstatic Dance LA and the specific DJ that played this event in our show notes and on our Instagram. And that was 2 hours. Like, it was 2 hours straight of nonstop music. I did not make dancing. It the whole 2 hours. But you only rested for like 20 minutes.
That's true.
Maybe 30.
That's true.
Still a long time.
And now I am very tired.
And lots of people were resting. Like, lots of people were coming on and off the dance floor, going in. I mean, there were some people who didn't really dance, who stood on the dance floor just watching other people, hearing the music
another,
in
like,
their head, watching,
no pressure thing.
Yeah, looking out at the ocean. A lot of people sat on their blankets periodically, just... There was one person we saw who was dancing for a long time, and then for the last like 45 minutes of the thing, literally just stood. I don't even think they were looking out at the ocean. I think they were eyes closed, just stood like experiencing stillness. You saw that person.
Yeah.
They had flowers and seaweed in their hands and just like bead.
Yeah.
So that was 2 hours of nonstop music, and then it ended with a specific 15-minute segment that you were just about to talk about.
Oh, yeah. So it ended with a pretty smooth transition, as far as I recall, from the like more dancey music into more like relaxing music. And that, what was it called? Like medicine, like sound healing? What was it?
Was sound healing.
Is that really, did I get it right?
Yeah, it was called sound. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sound. I don't know.
They ended with sound healing.
Sound healing. So that was like peaceful, relaxing music, like the type you'd hear at a spa when you're getting a massage. And then there was another, this wasn't the DJ, this was a vocal liberationist, dragon priestess,
sound healer. We're not making these things up. These are self-identified labels.
As always on the show, this had our favorite combination of this was fucking weird, but also it was really cool.
Oh, yeah. Totally
cool, totally weird. And yeah, I mean, like her vocal performance, whatever group ASMR, I called it.
Yeah.
was definitely relaxing. I mean, she was definitely brought us down.
Some sort of vocal performance, I guess is the way you'd say it, into the microphones that it was transmitted to all of our headphones, so that like everybody stopped dancing and kind of sat down where they were, or stood where they were on the ocean front and just basked in the sound healing, I guess.
Yeah, winded down.
And it was real nice. And she walked through kind of some like guided meditation, breathwork stuff that just really put a cap on the whole experience and made the experience feel very like special and discreet and singular, and like this was intentional and purposeful. Like at the top of the circle, if it felt appropriate, like they talked about, you can bring an intention into this, like what do you want to feel, what do you want to bring to it, what do you want to get from it, and then revisited that again at the end of like, what did you get out of it, what gifts were given to you through this. And like
dolphins,
I was at the end of it, I was super blissed out. Yeah. It was really nice. It was just nice to kind of like hug you and sit on the beach and like see all these people that are strangers to me that are having a similar experience, and really appreciate the fact that we live in a place where we have access to something like this and where we can go and have this kind of a nice time on a Sunday afternoon.
Pretty neat.
It's pretty neat. And I think I agree with you. Like, I would not have appreciated it in the same way without the conversation with Dr. Till beforehand, kind of not even setting the expectations, but just like providing the context of what other people are getting out of it and what I can look to be getting out of it. Because again, in my head, and I'm saying this as somebody who enjoys dancing and has lots of different dancing contexts, but group dance to electronic music, I did not have the context for it that it was something primal and spiritual and community building. I had very much the like, I don't want to go to the club. I'm afraid that this is the club. I don't want the club.
Yeah, experience. And I don't know if I would have had the same level of like, oh God, is this going to be like some sexualized thing? Not, again, I don't mean to like, I'm not, like sex is bad. I'm not saying that.
Absolutely
not at all. But like, there's this like pressure. Oh, what if this person thinks that? What if this person thinks that?
Right.
Having that sort of like pre-removed
Right.
And this is just an example of like one of the things that I think we benefited from by talking to Dr. Till. I you know what I was just thinking is like, it's kind of like, you know, you're saying, did I need it? It's like whiskey tasting, right? It's like tasting, like, yeah, the scotch would be good anyway. But if somebody explained to me like all the flavors ahead of time, you know, like, oh, you're going to taste like some oak wood and some bourbon aged, you know, horse blanket. And then it's going to finish with it's, you know, obviously then when you take that shot of whiskey, it enhances the flavor and the experience.
Right. It did make me, this experience, and then also, again, the talking to Dr. Till, it does make me excited about exploring this world more in the future, just in my own life. Like, not in regards to the podcast, but just like...
Oh, yeah, I'd go again.
I would go to this again. I might go again this Sunday because I immediately like texted some friends like, oh my God, this thing was so cool. And they were like, we want to go. And I'm like, okay, let's go.
Wow, you guys have the same voice. That's
yeah, we all have
crazy.
the same voice and we talk to each other like that. It's really weird. But it also makes me want to explore other types of events, like go to a club that plays electronic dance music and see what that experience is like, or try something scarier. Like I was talking to a friend of mine who goes to like actual real life raves, and I don't mean like go to a club. I mean like you don't find out about the location until 3 hours beforehand. It's in a seedy warehouse downtown kind of raves where there's
cool enough for that. I'm
where
sorry.
There's definitely lots of drugs and probably lots of sex going on. That makes me interested in trying that experience as well and seeing what that is like. And I don't know, it just feels like something kind of opened up a little bit because we have this new context now.
Sure.
And being able to translate it into something that I think a lot of people are looking for. And I know that I am looking for, just the being in your body and connecting to spirituality. Hell yeah. Like I'm here for those things. I need those things. And this feels like a safer environment to explore that. And also knowing that there's a place specifically for neurodivergent people in this community, like that automatically makes it more. And that it's also like explicitly queer in a lot of ways. That makes it a safer environment to kind of explore these things.
Okay, but...
Oh, fuck.
Is it a cult?
I totally forgot that we had to do this.
Or just weird.
Shit.
You forgot? That's the premise of the show,
I know,
Kayla.
but I thought we were
That's the show.
Ending. Okay, let's get into it. I didn't write the...
Okay, but hold on. Before we get into it, though, I think we have to, like, narrow down. Like, I don't think... I've been giving this some thought. I don't think we can just say, like, is music a cult? You know what I mean? Like, that's too broad. Like, that's just music. So I think we have to, like, pick something, and I think that it makes sense for us to just say, like, you know, and this is slightly arbitrary, but I think it makes sense to pick Ecstatic Dance LA as the group to analyze here. Because it can't, like, again, it has to be a group. There has to be something you can touch.
Yeah. And
right? It can't be like... Yes, it's the concept of dance.
Yeah, you're right. Although I think we've done stuff like that before in the past. But
well, that we shouldn't. Bad past us. Bad.
You're also right because, you know, this is something that Dr. Till and I talked about. And he said something like, well, the charismatic leader is the DJ. And I'm like, yeah, but then that makes every individual club a potential cult. Or every individual party a potential cult, depending on the DJ. So I don't think we can do that because I'm going to be here forever. So yes, let's just talk about Ecstatic Dance. And
Thursday, May 7th, 1998, was that an individual night? Was that a cult or just weird?
Finite cult, Brigadoon.
Joke's on you. There was no way I was going to a club in high school. 1998,
you're still in high school? Yeah, you were.
All right, let's get to the criteria.
Charismatic leader. We're talking about Ecstatic Dance LA, which I think is part of a larger, we talked about on the show, it's a part of a larger network of loosely affiliated groups that do ecstatic dance in various cities across North America. But for our purposes, we're focusing specifically on Ecstatic Dance LA. And the presence of a charismatic leader, I'm going to say, is high.
Yeah.
There are two co-founders of Ecstatic Dance LA, and their names are Robin Parrish, who is identified on the website as co-founder, resident DJ, and managing director. And the other gentleman is a man named Asataye, and he is also listed as co-founder, movement facilitator, and spiritual director.
Was one of those guys the MC dude that did the prayer circle?
Robin Parrish is the gentleman who kind of introduced, opened up the event, did the grounding circle in the beginning, told us all the guidelines, did breath work with us, and then at the end also did like a little bit of a closing. He closed it out. And he was also dancing with everybody.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, he was going through the crowd and dancing.
That makes sense.
Yeah, he was
shit, I have no idea which one that is now. Because like, I can picture all the different like dudes that were like, you know, dancing around. Yeah. And I have no idea which one he was.
So, charismatic leader obviously is very present. And I also just want to say, this is almost an aside, but it will definitely color our opinion. So the other gentleman, Asataye, do you remember where else this gentleman came into our lives tangentially?
Oh, shit. This just happened like on YouTube or something.
You and I were scrolling through TikToks, and I sent you a TikTok about, I don't know, some reality show that accidentally created a cult because they I don't remember the premise of the show, but they basically put together a bunch of, I don't know why you'd watch this show. They put together a bunch of traumatized people with a bunch of spiritual healers, quote unquote, and then like a cult formed. And one of the only spiritual healers.
Which, you know, that's expected.
Yes. One of the only spiritual healers who questioned the methods of the reality show and was going, this is bad, you guys. We should not be doing this. It was
quite bad. If you look into this, this is
very
like another
bad.
Episode. It was pretty bad.
The only healer who took issue with it was Asataye.
Who then, as it turns out, was also this guy.
Co-founder of Ecstatic Dance LA. So... Maybe charismatic leader, but maybe a little more ethical than some other folks that could be running something.
Yeah, I'd
like
say
this.
it's high, but I actually don't think it's. What's the guy's name?
Asataye or Robin? Robin was the gentleman who was there.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Evening.
But I would say, but he wasn't the DJ, right? I would say the charismatic leader is the DJ. I agree with Professor Till that.
I disagree.
That the DJ is the charismatic leader here.
I disagree. Because no, you're wrong.
Wow, you've really presented some compelling evidence for your argument.
I feel like that's kind of saying, like, well, if you go to a Catholic mass, the charismatic leader is the people singing.
No.
Or if you go to a super Christian church where they're singing 6 songs throughout the entire service.
No, it's like going to a concert and the charismatic leader is the conductor.
I know. But
that was the whole purpose of what Dr. Till was talking about.
But if we're talking about Ecstatic Dance LA and not this one event, this one single event, then we're talking about the founders.
You're taking issue with the fact that this DJ was like a one-time thing?
Yeah, they have different DJs.
I guess there are different DJs every time.
It's different DJs every time. So if we're talking about Ecstatic Dance LA, the organization, or are we talking about this single moment in time that you and I attended? Because maybe those are different answers.
I don't know. I just really am attached to the idea that Dr. Till was talking about, that the DJ, especially because we talked about this before the break, how similar it is to other cult leaders where it's just like, yeah, man, like part of the value is just being able to let go. And like, it's the DJ that gives you that, not the guy that's like.
But he is also a DJ. He probably does DJ sometimes.
All right. Either way, I would say
DJ.
I would say hi. And we can debate later as to who exactly it was, but either way, we're in agreement that it's a DJ of some sort and relatively high because of the things that we've already talked about.
Expected harm.
Okay, so this one seems like it's negative.
Yeah, it's like expected goodness,
expected help. However, I will say that looking through some of the Instagram stuff from some of the people involved. Yeah. There's a little, you have to be careful. There's a little bit of a potential slippery slope. Ecstatic dance, weird stuff, moon juice, goop, and now I'm an anti-vaxxer. So there's a bit of a slide there.
That involves hippies and new age, you have to take with a grain of salt and go in with your eyes wide open. Otherwise, you could find yourself on that pipeline.
Yeah, just beware when there's new age involved.
But I think if you just go and dance, which is kind of the expectation, the expected harm is, although the Sam did kind of twist my ankle a couple times.
That's true. And then the sand is still in between my toes right now. It's kind of irritating. Feet. Oh my God. Yeah.
A child almost impaled you.
Actually, that's true. If I had been impaled, we would be singing a different tune right now.
So I think we're going to say low.
Low, but watch out for the children.
Presence of ritual.
Yeah. So very high.
Some of the highest.
Very high. But actually, I will say this. When I looked around and I'm like, does this look like because I did that. I was like, is this a cult I'm in right here? Because we're going to have to answer that. I looked around and I'm like, actually, as weird as this looks, a lot of times the things that make us go like, oh, that's a cult are the weird uniformity. And that was absent here.
I don't agree.
A lot of
Everyone
times,
had flowy clothes on and
times,
flowy pants.
everybody's wearing the same white robe and has the same bowl haircut and is the same weirdo white person. And this was not that. Everybody was dressed differently. There was diversity.
What does this have to do with presence of ritual?
Because some of the hallmarks I count as ritual, like things that are indicative that you're in an in-group versus a different group.
Everybody had the same headphones on.
Okay, but like that's Brandon.
Also, everybody had fucking flowy pants and big capes.
Everybody had the same types of clothes, but like compare this to Source Family. Like Source Family's walking around, or like Heaven's Gate, right? They're all walking around and they're like white robes.
But those are two like actual factual cults.
Sure, and we're
think
comparing
about
them
other groups that we've said are people in MLMs don't, except on like fucking LuLaRoe. Like Avon ladies aren't wearing the same outfits.
It's not just the outfits. I'm just saying, if I was just looking at it at a glance, I wouldn't necessarily say this is cult looking. I would say this is more weird looking. The ritual is definitely there, but it's lacking some of the like in-group, out-group, like signifier ritual stuff.
That makes sense.
Except for the headphones.
It is very like come one, come all.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah. Like it's with the Source Family, it's like you go to the Source restaurant and even if they weren't, the servers, like you would know who was who.
Yeah. Niche within society. It's pretty niche.
It's niche, but
this specific thing, there was 200 people there. How out of 10 million people that live in Los Angeles?
That's true. If we're talking specifically about Ecstatic Dance LA, then yes, this is niche. But I do want to call out,
dancing to electronic music is not niche.
Yeah, and very much so. And also, I think deserves calling out here that there's a history as old as humanity behind this type of activity.
True.
Which I think drains it of some of its nicheness, nichosity.
Let's call it medium then.
Okay.
Anti-factuality.
I don't even know how that would apply here.
Yeah, we danced. We did do that.
We did dance. They said you were going to dance, and then we danced. So fact.
I guess the tangential, like, potential pipeline stuff, like the DJ is a life coach, and the sound healer is peddles, like, weird herbs and maybe puts you on a pipeline towards being anti-vax. Like there is the potential for getting onto anti-factual tracks.
Yeah, but I feel like I can't ding them for that. At least not in this category. Like I can say like, hey, go do this. Just don't buy the ashwagandha or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think they deserve to be dinged because like people involved also have other hobbies that include like going to Moon Juice.
Percentage of life consumption.
I would say low, but like during the event, it's supposed to like just consume your brain entirely. It is supposed to be all
encompassing, yeah.
But that's sort of the purpose.
But it's for 2 hours once a week.
Yeah.
So even if you like maxed out your time, like even if you max out your time with Ecstatic Dance LA, it's maybe 3 hours on a Sunday.
And they didn't feel too like solicity of my time.
They
you
told us about
you can volunteer, and they told us about upcoming events, but I didn't feel like particularly like nobody came up to us and was like, this is your first, because they asked if you were first time.
Right.
They said, raise your hand if you're first timers. But I didn't get anybody coming up to me going, hey, first timer, I'm gonna love bomb you now.
This wasn't an onboarding. This wasn't like a do this and then you can learn more about the next level and then come to this workshop and then pay us this money for this thing. It was like, this is the thing.
Yeah.
This is the thing and this is the thing.
Right. Very low.
Dogmatic beliefs.
I did not get the impression at all that, again, this is come one, come all.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, you can come to this dance thing and not dance. Like that says dogma very low to me.
And even though they have rules, it wasn't like and these are the rules that everybody should follow all of the time. It was just like for this specific space at this specific time, these are our rules, and not every event needs to have these rules. Just these are our rules for this
It's just like
event.
This is what you need to do to participate. Like very straightforward.
Chain of victims. Well, I already roped 2 friends into doing this with me.
This is, I don't know, man. I think, but the chain of victims is on you. So when we do, is Kayla a cult? Yes.
Yeah.
Is Ecstatic Dance LA displaying of chain of victims? I don't know. Yeah, we just said that they weren't really like heavy into the love bombing recruiting, like go tell your friends.
Right.
So I would say no.
Last one. Safer unsafe exit.
Okay, well, it was actually pretty difficult walking on the sand all the way back to the parking lot.
Walking on the beach, you might step on a stick. It might hurt your foot.
Right. Or that little kid might have fucking come up behind me and just like stabbed me.
It was hard to walk in the sand.
Poor kid.
Yeah.
Actually, no. No, this poor kid was swinging a pointy stick around.
You really got offended by this
very
child.
upset. Very upset. So aside from that, I guess pretty safe.
It was a very easy exit.
Okay.
So
definitely not a cult because it scored lowly on all of the
pretty much
stuff.
everything except for charismatic leader and ritual.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird.
Very weird.
Very weird.
Sure.
Very great. Highly recommend if you're in LA, even for a small amount of time, try to hit a Sunday and you can go to Ecstatic Dance LA.
And if you want to experience the maximum amount of weirdness, you don't even have to. You actually probably shouldn't go to Ecstatic Dance LA. You should go to where they are without having the headphones.
Yeah.
And just walk through and be like, who the fuck are all these people that are just flipping out?
And then maybe you'll see a dolphin.
And the dolphins are, that's another cult, maybe.
Probably.
That wasn't that funny. That was dumb.
I'm really glad we did that.
Me too.
This is definitely this is a top 10 episode, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. I need to go take a nap.
I'm so thirsty.
This is Chris.
This is Kayla.
And this has been
Cult
or just Ecstatic Weird
Dance.